Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Race Rep Interviews Horde Edition. Welcome, everyone, to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Orc Race Rep Interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hi there, I'm Alisard, and it's an honor to be the racial representative of the Orcs this year for this year's Tournament of Ages.
Thanks for taking the time to do this interview, Alisard. And first question, what made you choose your race?
Well, I've always kind of liked the underdogs that are the Orcs in terms of the Warcraft story. I've always enjoyed said story, stretching all the way back to Warcraft 1 to present day. Both lore characters, the development, the culture, the language, everything about it. I've always just had a big fascination for the Orcish people.
The Orcish people are pretty awesome. They do have a lot of deep lore. One of my favorite Horde races. Would you say a lot of that lore is what makes you so passionate about the Orcs as a race? If not, could you expand on what makes you so passionate about this race?
As I said, I've always been the one for the underdogs. I've never really enjoyed the whole concept of the humans and everything else, the good guys always being on top. I always like the fact that this is a this is a race that's always been perceived as the enemy, the big bad enemy of the Horde and such and such. And I've always tried to have a redeeming factor for said race, because story-wise, they were not always evil, warmongering barbarians.
Right, it's only when Gul'dan kind of came in with the demon blood that they turned
Exactly.
into that
Don't
evil
drink the spiked
warmongering
fell
race.
juice.
Yeah, exactly. He really corrupted them like that. That being said, with orcs and all their amazing lore and the deep dive that we have of them, surprisingly they can't be every class yet. So my next question is, if your race could be any class, which class would it be? And it doesn't have to be a World of Warcraft class. You could come up with any class.
Personally, I mean, if we sticking to Warcraft races, I would pick either between a hunter or a warrior or a shaman. Those are probably the three biggest ones. No particular order that I would rank them. I just think, off the top of my head, those are probably the three classes that I would affiliate orcs the most, considering they have all shamanistic backstories. They have the worshipping of the ancestors and the elements for their shaman aspect. They're hardcore, die-hard warriors that will lay down their lives for almost anything. And of course, what's a good orc without having a giant wolf for a pet?
This is true. They do like their giant wolves. Is there any class that they don't have yet that you'd like to see them get?
I think one thing out of all the years of playing World of Warcraft on how there's the big contradictory thing between the Horde having primarily shamans and the Alliance having primarily paladins, I would possibly like to see an orc paladin just to see what kind of story or how they would kind of warp that into the aspect of an orc who is essentially one that is not fond of the light, now wielding the light itself as a weapon, similar to priests.
That's true. We do have orc priests now. Obviously, it would be very
Yeah,
cool to see orc paladins. Any race having paladin would be pretty cool. Now, the orcs are the heavy hitters on the horde side, I would say. A lot of amazing characters. Which orc lore character is your favorite lore character?
If I were to pick any one of them, I mean, most people tend to pick Thrall. I tend to go out of the lines and go back to Warcraft 2 days of Orgrim Doomhammer. I like the fact that he was basically the one that, even though every orc was practically brainwashed and basically worshipping Gul'dan and the demons and everything of that sort of matter, he's the one that basically decided that something doesn't seem right with our people, something's got to change, and the fact that he basically challenged Blackhand into Maghar, killed him, and he basically turned the Horde into something of, instead of an invading force, it was now part of the fact that now we just need to conquer our enemies simply because we need to have a place in the world since we can't go back to our home. Um, he also led the whole campaign of eradicating the whole corruption that plagued the Orcs, mainly the Shadow Council and Gul'dan. Now, of course, that obviously backfired in the Second War, but it's always been he's always been probably the primary like orc figure that I tend to look to the most. Mostly because he was never a shaman. He was basically just a born warrior looking out for his people, and I just think that was kind of something that was different among everything else going on at the time for other orc characters, where they were just basically power hungry, corruptive, wanting to basically breach anything that they got. And Orgrim's just like, this needs to stop.
Yeah, he really led the charge, and that's something that they kind of changed in the movies. They kind of made him like a tertiary character in a sense. But yeah, no, Doomhammer's a really great choice that I don't think a lot of people tend to look to. He gets overlooked, but I like that pick. I got his hammer on my wall, so
Oh, believe me, if I had the choice of Doomhammer, but I already have the space taken up by Frostworm and Gornhowl.
there you go. Two great choices. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. We
Yeah,
greatly
of course.
appreciate it, and we'll see you during the opening ceremonies when you all march out.
I look forward to it.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Maghar Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Sword Tap, otherwise known as Kazra of Six Deaths, or Kazra of the Burning Blade.
Well, thank you, Kazrat, for taking the time to do this interview. I'm going to get on with the first question, which is what made you choose Maghar as your race?
Well, it started off when I was still kind of looking into other characters or races that I was wanting to roleplay with, and Maghar kind of stuck with me for a hot minute. I don't know why, but I I liked how the Iron Horde was during WoD, because I think that was also during time when I was with the Dwarven Vanguard, and I was still trying to figure things out. But after playing Orc for a little bit and then seeing the Maghar came out, I don't know what it was entirely, but just the Burning Blade themselves, particularly, and just the customizations and all that, and just also the lore that was behind with WoD, the expansion itself, kind of hooked on me. So
Yeah, I think WoD is what really made a lot of people super interested in the Maghar, because obviously we knew about them before WoD in lore and everything like that, but it's not like there was many left around. A lot of the orcs that were on Azeroth, at least, were all like the fell corrupted orcs, and we still had those settlements out in Nagrand. But now we actually get to play them and be them and embody what each like clan represents. You know, you got the fiery warmongering war song clan, you got your burning blade clan, we have the shadow moon and all that sort of stuff,
yeah,
and we get to see more of the frost wolves, where Thrall comes from, and all those
yeah,
iconic characters from there.
yeah, and that was actually kind of one of the other factors too. Is compared to like the main universe orcs, where they kind of lost a bit of their culture, the alternate didn't really lose theirs. Like
No,
they
they
all
brought it over.
yeah, they kind of turned into a melting pot. So I get to do a lot of like theory crafting for the Burning Blade as well, which I've been doing a lot of while also doing like Blade Master training on the side and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, it was a melting pot. They came over with a lot of their stuff still intact, whereas a lot of the orcs that we had lost kind of that culture and spirit of what they used to be. But would you say a lot of that is what makes you so passionate about playing a Maghar? And if not, would you care to expand on that passion?
For a lot of what brought me the passion for it is just once again like the fact that like they've got unpolluted culture aside from like maybe just the mingling of like the other clans to a more diverse effect. I think if I'm using the right word correctly. Um just being able to like literally just kind of look at like what cultures influence like the clans individually and like expand upon that even more, even with like the orcish. Like I think it's one thing where orcish is actually changed for the main universe, where it's a very common thing. It's spelled an exact particular way. Where the Maghar, they still have their own unique dialects between the clans. Like they still understand each other, but they're still unique compared to the traditional orcish.
Yeah, they kept a lot of their origins with them, right? They didn't
Yep.
lose any of that. They fought for it, obviously, as we saw through Draenor. That was kind of what the purpose of the Iron Horde was for. They were fighting for them and to keep their cultures and all that stuff, their peoples around and alive, and they didn't want to be slaves to the Legion like they were in
Yep.
the olden times. We get that amazing cinematic where an Iron Star hits like Gul'dan and the blood of Mannoroth spills everywhere, and then a hooded figure comes up and grabs him, and it turns out it's Garrosh, and he's like, "Times change," and then we get that epic speech from his father Grom, right? So
Yep.
you could tell that there was a fire of like a renewed orcish people that wanted to go out and make like their people be their people. They wanted to fight for their planet.
Yep.
They wanted to fight for their culture, and
Yep.
it's something that made Warlords of Draenor a good expansion lore wise, I would say.
Oh, absolutely.
And you know, in well, I was going to say in Warlords. In Warlords we got introduced to the Maghar, obviously, but now we have them in game. They come with a variety of classes. One being priest, and we saw that orcs were finally able to like wield the light in some capacity, in some way, with the whole whatever they wanted to
So,
do with Yrel and them in that alternate universe.
so a little theory of mine as to why they gave us priests with the Maghar, because I don't think they ever explained that, is just because like the Shadow Moon, they delved into the void and you have shadow priests.
Right.
So I think that was more of it. It was just, implemented later till they brought the Lakash. I think that was actually during Dragonflight, where it's the song Heart of the Song or Song of the Heart.
Right. Yeah.
Or was when they actually implemented like priests actually joining in, but they didn't introduce it in like the same manner as like like the dwarves, the humans in that, where it's priests of the light, of like a church like ceremony. It's still that shamanistic spiritual kind of
Yeah,
concept.
they're shadow priests from the Shadow Moon clan. And
Yeah.
on the topic of classes, because like I was saying, the Maghar did come with a wide variety of classes. Um, if you could pick from WoW, from the World of Warcraft RPG, or any fantasy setting, what class would you like to see the Maghar get?
Like the RPG you said and all
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, it could be the
I'd have
RPG.
if it was a class that they don't have already, it has to be Pyremaster. Reason for that is Pyremaster, for one, is a unique concept of bringing both like an unholy DK and like a shaman into one. Like you deal with funeral rites, you deal with and you also kind of deal with the undead, but it's all consistent with like the element of fire. There's a lot of rituals and all that. They have their attunement is to fire specifically, but it also brings that necromancy that's also in shamanism as well. And I think it would actually be a really cool thing to see implemented in the game as well.
And just from what you've been saying, because I actually am not familiar with that class, but it sounds like what we would be able to see is a lot more of the culture come forward too, because you were talking about like ceremonial
Yeah,
rites for like maybe funerals and stuff
yeah,
like that. So we would be able to
yeah.
see a wider aspect to the lore of the race itself.
Yes, it is actually it is within the RPG book. It is actually was an orc specific thing, and it's a very secretive thing. But I believe within the book, I'm pulling straight from memory on this, so forgive me. But it is able to be taught to other races. It's just you'd have to find the right teacher that'd be willing to accept you. But it brings a lot of the culture, a lot of like how they did their funerals, what secrets and rites they did and such.
So it was more of like an apprentice based system, right? They didn't just let
Yep.
anybody be this specific thing. You had to be taught, it had to be instructed to you, taught to you, really ingrained into you as a person, so you're able to go out and do this properly and not just willy nilly do whatever you think is right.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I like that a lot, especially since there's a cultural aspect behind it, because we get to learn more, and learning more about all the races that we get to play in the lore is always fun. Now, also with that being said, I'm gonna kind of segue into the next question. So we've known about Maghar for a long time, since God knows how long for World of Warcraft, right? Um,
Yeah.
Now they're in the game. Now we have more characters. We've seen old characters come back, like Lantresser of the Blade and Grommash, and like all these characters. Which Maghar lore character would you pick as your favorite lore character?
That's a tough one. I'd have to say Lantrasaur or Gromash, honestly. Gromash for like the usual given, like he's just the orc, as many would put it. But Lantrasaur, just because like he's from my favorite clan, he's got a unique situation to him. Like he's born of orcs and Draenei, and like he's considered an outcast, but he's not at the same time. Not at the same time. Like I know MU version, like he was still part of the clan. The alternate universe, like he did get exiled at some point, and so it was a unique thing to see him when you go and unlock the Maghar, to see him still fighting for the Maghar even after everything that's gone.
Right, and him and Grom kind of make their final stand, right, so that we could bring
Yes,
the
that
Maghar as we know it into the fold of the main universe.
I am so glad you were. I am not the only one that noticed that, because that was actually one of the biggest things that made me upset, was seeing him run off with Gromash against the Lightbound.
And knowing what was going to happen to them both, right? You're
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
oh,
Yeah, you're just like, they're both gone, son of a gun.
like
And
you did
Lanchasaur is like,
this.
Lanchasaur is such a badass warrior. Excuse my language. He's
Oh, it's all
just
good.
dope of a warrior.
Yeah,
And the fact that he had to go with Gromash, and I'm like, why? Can't just come with me.
and even at their clearly like advanced age, they both had the spirit and fight of warriors, right? And they're like, we're gonna do what we're known for, and we're gonna die with honor and for the sacrifice that our people could go and make a better life for themselves, right? It's very orcish,
Abs-
their death.
Absolutely. Like, 1000%, they earned that warrior death.
They 100% did. If they had an orc Valhalla, the Valkyries would be taking them home.
To the eternal hunting grounds or glorious battlefield, whichever one they believed in.
True, exactly. I forgot that they could go and hunt with what is it, Logosh in Eternity.
So Logosh is actually a main universe believed.
Ooh,
Yes,
okay.
so that's actually something that I learned relatively recently as well. Was the orcs learned about Logosh through the Tauren. They had a concept of him, but they never had a name to him. So it wasn't until like they met with the Tauren was when there was a name given to him. So Maghar would actually be very unknown of that name, unless they've, at least if they've been hiding under a rock for who knows how long. Because who knows how many times Logosh has been mentioned in conversations of the sort, especially
True.
when talking to like your shamans.
That is very, very true. And honestly, something I didn't know. So I'm learning something here. I just figured it got carried over into the alternate universe, but I guess it makes sense that
they,
they're being
they very could
too.
have,
Yeah, you never know, right?
but yeah, they've not said anything on it. So that's so far what it is, at least on a canon level, as far as we know.
Yeah. It's also neat, though, that, like, both universes don't have the exact same things. It kind of reminds me of, like, how the, like, Marvel comic book universe works and like the DC comic book universe with like all their different Earths and how like each person's
Yeah.
different and doesn't know exactly everything and they all have different personalities and act different. Makes it
Oh
interesting.
yeah. Yeah, it's real fun to toy with. It's real.
Yeah, Lantresser would probably be my pick too. I was a big fan of Lantresser, so I'm glad to hear that there's some other love for our half orc, half Draenei.
Yeah,
But with that being said, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. It's been great talking with you.
absolutely.
And I will see you with all the other race reps at the opening ceremonies.
Rock on.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Troll Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Mosaku, and I am the leader of the Shadow Tusk clan on Wormrest Accord.
Thank you for taking the time to do this interview with us. We're going to jump right into the first question, which is what made you choose Troll as your race?
Well, around 2019, group of my friends decided that we were going to hop over from Alliance roleplay on Wormrest Accord to go see how Horde roleplay was, and they found the Shadow Tusk clan, and they kind of dragged me over there. So that's how I started choosing Troll as my race.
Very nice. It's always good when friends kind of bring you along to things and then it works out for the better.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and ask the next question. Perry?
Me. Ha! Hello. So, what makes you so passionate about trolls?
So one of the things I did with this character was I made them a character that didn't really know whole lot about their own lore. So I learned the troll lore as my character learned troll lore. And what I found is very deep and culturally significant race in World of Warcraft that has a lot of neat, dark and good aspects about it that makes it just a really cool class and race.
Say, that's a really cool concept. I don't think I've ever heard someone play a character where like their character doesn't know anything because they don't know anything. So that must have been like very good for character development and just interesting to go through and learn because like not only are you learning it for the first time, right? Your character is obviously learning it.
It does make the interactions and like finding out stuff a lot more genuine. I feel when I'm writing.
Very nice. Yeah, it definitely adds a little extra something something.
Does, yeah.
Yeah, you could go ahead with the next one.
Alrighty. If your race could be any class, which class would it be?
Demon hunters, and the reason is shadow hunters in lore wield glaives, and demon hunters are the only class that can wield glaives.
True.
Demon Hunter is definitely a good pick. You're the first person so far who has picked something that isn't Druid. Druid has been one of the favorites. So would you say, let's say if like we didn't just limit your pick to World of Warcraft, but to like maybe the WoW RPG or any other fantasy genre, would you then pick Shadow Hunters?
Oh yes, definitely.
Cool. Yeah, they're very
Good pick,
cool.
yeah.
They got some nice lore, and just from what we've seen of them in game, they are pretty badass. So, you know, why not, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Would you say there was any specific character behind your inspiration for picking Shadowhunter, or is it just like the class itself that specifically draws you to it?
It was just the class itself that drew me to it. It's a very unique path for trolls because there's a lot of it's like a lot of balance between they do good and they also do dark things. I mean, we see Vol'jin is considered a priest in some aspects, but he's also dealing damage with black arrows and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
it's
he's got a
really
mix.
spread out.
Yeah, because like his Hearthstone card's a priest card, but like he's a shadow hunter in game, which is like a mix of a bunch of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So okay, and I mean throughout like troll lore, we do kind of see that there is an instance where a troll priest is found by I think it's like Turalian and some people, and they're drawn to this presence of a light to an area of the light to an area, and then they find out it's a troll, and they're like, the light is imbued with this troll. How could this be? Because they didn't think like the light could be in something they considered a monster.
You're talking about Zabra Hex. He was found by Alexandros Maghar
Yeah, there you go.
in what would become Scarlet Monastery. They wanted to kill him, but Alexandros saw that he was studying the books about the light, and he is so far the only troll in lore that will that actually learns the light as humans teach it.
Yeah, I always found that very interesting. Just that one story, and they were like, we're gonna spare him because he's like reading our teachings of things.
Yep.
Now trolls, we've seen them a lot in the last couple of expansions. I would say at the start of Legion, we got a bit disappointed with where a certain character was going, but I'm not gonna expand on that too much because we'll just be here all day crying. So out of all the trolls in lore, which troll's your favorite lore character?
Well, not to sound like a broken record player here, but it's a little unknown troll named Zabra Hex. So,
How convenient.
yep.
Very convenient.
And is it because of that story specifically?
Yes, he just has a really unique story, and it carries on into Legion when he's pretty instrumental in helping the priests order Hall and circumventing an invasion from the Legion.
Honestly, I didn't even put that together that was him. Just because like my knowledge of the story was so limited, I just always found it was neat. I didn't even realize that he was the one from it.
Yep.
That's crazy. Wow. Okay. That's actually really neat and super convenient that we were just mentioning
Yeah.
him, and then you're like, yeah, no, that's my favorite lore character. I really
Yep,
like
there
it
you go.
when people don't pick main characters. It's always neat to
Okay.
see people picking like the side characters or like random quest characters, right? Like I just
Mm-hmm.
picture a lot of troll players would be like, oh, it's Vol'jin, or it's like Rastakhan, or it's Zappy Boy, you know? Like,
Mm-hmm.
How can you not like Zappy Boy though?
it's true. I mean, you can like Zappy Boy, but you know, there's other trolls out there, man.
One of my friends, one of their favorite characters was a character named Morlabeam, I think is what his name is. He is one of the skeletons located in the graveyard in Duskwood.
Oh, okay.
He has a little bit of a quest line there, but yeah,
Oh, I
it's
remember
just
that
that
quest.
it's one of those offshoot characters that you never hear about. So, like you're saying, it's interesting to find other people that like those smaller characters out there.
Yeah, you never know. There's just so many characters in the story, right? Everyone's gonna have
Mm-hmm.
a character that you might not expect, and that might be more in the background than anything. Like one little fun side quest, like the mud mug side quest from Pandaria, or you know, like all those things, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it on my end. Perry, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Hmm. I have another question.
Okay.
That's why we're here. Who's your favorite lower?
Ooh.
Oh, my favorite Loa?
Yeah, your favorite lower.
Ooh. You know, I would have said Shango prior to the troll racial quest, but Kevoyositi is rising up in the ranks for me quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and say Kevoyositi.
You might have to explain that one. I don't think I've heard of that one.
It's spoilers for the troll quest line.
Ooh, okay. So maybe we'll leave it a
Oh,
mystery.
I do know what you're talking about. Never mind. I've done
Yep.
that quiz chain. Yes, I do quite like that one.
Awesome. Well, Mozaku, thank you for taking the time to do this.
Hey, thank y'all for having me.
It was our pleasure, and we will see you along with all the other race reps at the opening ceremonies.
I'll see y'all there.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Zandalari Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Howdy, I'm Kola.
Kola, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm going to leap into our first question, which is what made you choose Zandalari as your race of choice?
So I loved druids since I was like playing the game in my vanilla and Burning Crusade days. And I never really felt like too much pull to them because, you know, at the time, druid forms and stuff were really limited. The classes they were, the races they were part of were really limited. So for me, like, I didn't really feel too connected to Tauren back then. I never really felt connected to Alliance at the same time. When Legion came out, I was actually coming back to the game after some time away. So like end of Mists, I had come back, and by Legion, I was still trying to figure out what I actually liked playing. And around that time, you know, Legion had the druid forms and stuff, so that kind of pulled me back into playing druid. And when BFA was starting to get announced, they showed off the dinosaur forms. And me as a kid, I was an avid dinosaur kid. I had, in my art classes for high school, I basically had my entire, like, not art school, but like my art class in high school, like I had my entire portfolio about dinosaurs. So I drew a lot of like amateur dinosaur stuff. I wanted to be a paleo artist at one point, and just seeing like the Zandalari living with dinosaurs and it not be the kind of thing from Mists where, like, you know, Isle of Thunder, they have it there, and Isle of Thunder is a lot more of like
they're portraying the Zandalari as like villainous and everything, right? They also in that portray dinosaurs as something to control, like it's a big monster that you're controlling and you're dominating, and that's what makes you like an impressive race. But the Zandalari that they feature with BFA was nothing like that. And the stories in there too were more akin to like it's like a paleo artist dream of like what if humans could live with dinosaurs and stuff like that. So that's kind of what brought me into it, and then I got way more passionate about the race after that.
I feel like dinosaurs is something we could all very much touch on when it comes to our childhood selves. I know I was big into dinosaurs myself, and then I mean, still kind of am because like we have the dino games out there like Ark and all that stuff. So
Path of
I'm
Titans.
yeah, exactly. I'm sort of the same mindset where I saw the Zandalari druid forms and I was like, dinosaurs, these are epic, and so that's what kind of drew me to that class for Zandalari, because I do have a Zandalari druid. But yeah, it's cool to see how like your love for dinosaurs and you wanting to do stuff with dinosaurs as for your career is what drew you towards being a Zandalari druid specifically, but also to play the Zandalari because they're in touch with dinosaurs. It's like a big part of their culture from what we could see. They have the Brutosaurs that carry people around and all this stuff. They have their war beasts. So that's really cool. Now, you said that's you mentioned passion, so that's what I'm going to jump into next because that's our next question. So I'll let you expand on your passion. So if you could expand on what makes you so passionate about the Zandalari.
Right. So all the stuff with dinosaurs as like the ground, the base work of like what I was interested in. And as I was learning more and more about the Zandalari and reading into them and everything, this is a little hard to like try and explain because it's not like I've lived in these areas with my family. Half my family lives in like a jungle type place, you know. They're in like a tropical area that kind of every time I've seen pictures, every time I've been told stories as I was growing up and like heard from them, we support them over there because they need us to support them. Um it Zandalar like as a zone and the way those people live reminds me of that. Reminds me of that family. And like all the pictures and stuff I saw growing up, I still see those types of pictures. Like there's some crazy stuff they get up to. But that's part of what made me so passionate about it. The other is that like the warrior priest motif is something that I really ascribe to. And it helps that the Zandalari don't pull from like cultures and inspirations in real life that are kind of overdone. They pull from things that don't normally get any kind of visibility. So to see that is kind of heartening because my own like culture is the same way. It doesn't really get visibility, and most of the time when there is visibility for these types of cultures and traditions and beliefs and stuff, there's always like a caveat to it, or there's some kind of negative implication from the author, whether they intended or not. I'd say the Warcraft team is still working on that part of portraying these things without having negative implications applied to them. But the fact that they are working on it now and moving away from like old things was something that also like pulled me towards Zandalari.
Right, so a lot of your passion comes from like deep familial ties and like cultural significance and ties from what you have in like real life compared to what you see in the video game, right? Because
Right.
like you said, the culture behind Zandalari isn't really something that we see a lot in video games, and sometimes when we do, it ends up being like negative because like that culture is portrayed as like villains or something, and then there's a big boss that we have to go fight. But reality, they're not portrayed super villainous in Battle for Azeroth. Luckily, I mean they've got their villainous qualities just like all the other races have their villainous qualities because there's a war going on, so they got to do stuff
Right,
that
yeah.
they're not normally probably gonna do, right? Um, and like the Zandalari from you said before, the Isle of Thunder, let's say, are different than the ones in Zandalari themselves, because like the ones from the Isle of Thunder are tied to like the Prophet Zul when he's going back to revive the Thunder King and try and get the Empire back, even though Rastakhan doesn't really know that that's what's happening.
Are we
Um,
referencing Chronicle 4 right now?
I've never read Chronicle 4, so
Oh, they like really hammer that in of like Rastakhan does not know anything that's going on, and I was like, what do you mean?
I just remember that from Mists, honestly, and being told all that stuff because we knew that
Oh
like
yeah, they
Zandalar got really hit hard by the cataclysm from what we were told, but then we go to Zandalar and we're like, huh, this place isn't
Yeah.
underwater like we were told it was.
Yeah,
So,
it's really crazy the way that they've spun around from, and I think that's something that's really amazing too, as far as like video game direction and stuff goes, is that people really liked the Zandalari, and they had put them in this place where it was like, you know, one of the raid tiers, like one of the LFR wings for Throne of Thunder was the last stand of the Zandalari. So it was like, were we going to see them again or not? Did we defeat them and that was just it? With Mists, we had like little bits and pieces hinted in, I think, Legion, because you could see like the little Koltarost soldiers around, and then some of the Zandalari were there too in, I think it was Asuna.
yeah.
Yeah, they were like shipwrecked or something and being kept by those stinky giants as like Pokemon or something like that. But that's something that's like, it's really amazing what you can do when you care a little bit more about the culture behind the thing that you like have in your game, and you kind of like push it a little further than this trope they were going for, the Zandalari before, I guess is what I would say. And just the way that they turned all of that around, which is like, oh yeah, well, Rastakhan didn't necessarily know everything and kind of just let him do his own thing. Chronicles 4 definitely pushes that a lot harder, of like he was completely unaware of everything as opposed to like having a suspicious feeling, which is a little silly, but like at the end of the day, we got Zandalari for it.
True, we did end up getting a lot of content and the Zandalari for it, so it's like, was it really that bad of a change or to overemphasize, you know?
I'm sure some people wanted the like old Zandalari, but
Oh,
I
probably.
I really like the Zandalari we have now.
One of the things that I like before, well, I'll touch on this quick before we move to our next question, is when you go to Zandalar, you see every troll tribe in Zandalar, and they're
Yes.
all like trying to vie to get like their own part of their kingdom back, right? Like all their
Yeah.
champions are there. They have their own little emissary areas, so it was very cool to see that.
Yes, and there's a lot of like lore tied to that too. Like and I have like a performance based on part of this in the troll history. But the reason why the Amani, Faraki, and the Gurubashi have their own enclaves is because they were part of the Troll Akir War. Back like way back, even before Night Elves were around. So they kind of like carved out and earned those spaces, and are kind of regarded as heroes. Faraki kind of like come later in how they like when they fight the Akir, but like they are still like part of that hero that hero tier of like trolls. Drakari don't have one because they were exiled in the lore.
Oh,
So
okay. Kind of makes sense. You would figure
Yeah.
it'd be the Drakari.
it's very like it's very interesting that they took those and they kind of like I mean, this is me like filling in the gaps of like, well, of course they would have enclaves because they are regarded as like some of the strongest tribes. But it's very interesting how they kind of lead you to that conclusion with all of that. And I'm kind of hoping that because we had other places go neutral, that we have those two enclaves, the Faraki enclave and the Amani enclave go neutral too at some point. Because they got Rainforest Cafe over there in the Amani area.
And we want everyone to be able to enjoy it for sure. With all that being said, I am going to quickly move on to our next question, which is, out of all the classes in World of Warcraft, right, or in the WoW RPG, it doesn't have to be World of Warcraft, in any fantasy setting out there, which class would you like to see the Zandalari get, and which one would you be?
Ooh. I really would like something that really sells that idea of the warrior priest. So like Loa priest, where you actually call upon like the Loa to empower you in different ways, or the Dazari augur. The Dazari augur is like they're like a priest that uses fire. Um, when was the last time we actually had a Tal Dazar in rotation for M plus?
I think it's been a bit.
I couldn't remember if it happened this expansion has just like flown by
I think
in my
it
head.
happened in season 3 for Dragonflight.
Yeah, whenever it popped up, it was like, oh yeah, the augurs, they're cool. Like they're such a different take on the priestly type. And they also, I think, just about every single living troll in that dungeon has some kind of they have some kind of like Loa empowerment. I think it's all Bwansamdi because it's a Tal Dazar, the like city of the dead, basically for them, that they take care of. But they all have something related to the Loa in some way, and that's something I would like to see more with Zandalari now that they're here. You know, same thing with like other allied races that are here, and wow, they're here to stay. They should have their identity like carved out a little more that way.
So like more race specific classes, right? Something that's more
Yes.
like in kin with their culture and how they um, represent themselves and do all the things that they got to do. That's actually really cool. We've had one other person who's kind of touched on like a race specific class, but I think it would be awesome to see more stuff that our races could like deeply connect with instead of just having like all these random fantasy classes and being like, so these are the reasons, and then we're like, okay, but then we don't really see it in like society, you know?
Yeah, I was hoping that hero talents were going to be that before we got more information about them. Because like Druid is kind of due for being expanded away from Elune and the Cenarian Circle, and like that entire section of like it's not necessarily only tied to Night Elves, but it's so heavily tied to Night Elves that like if Tauren are brought up, or trolls are brought up, you never really hear about the Loa. We've gone like what is it, 3 times with referencing or having something to do with the Emerald Dream, and the only Loa that we get is one that's like supposedly a Loa.
Right, yeah. So it would be interesting to actually see that stuff expanded on for sure. Now, when we got the Zandalari, we were introduced to a lot of very interesting characters. Some characters we already knew about, obviously, from lore of ye olden times when Zandalari were talked about but not necessarily represented in the game. So, which Zandalari lore character would you say is your favorite lore character?
I think even out of all the old ones, I would still pick Talanji. Like she's had such a great character arc as far as like her going with you, you the Horde character, I should say, in BFA, and like going from a point where she is just a princess to actually doing the things that make her worthy of being a queen before her father gets killed and she has that thrust upon her.
Yeah,
And
she did get a lot of character development that I think was
yeah.
in a positive way, you know, whereas like some people get character developments and we're like, what is even going on here?
Yeah, I feel like the only reason people really unfairly disregard her is because of how the narrative direction squandered Rastakhan. And they're not wrong, they did squander him, but she's still a great character that stands on her own, regardless of that.
Yeah, there was probably a lot of people who were like, we've heard of Rastakhan for all these years and now we get him and this is what happens.
Yeah, and they kill him.
Yeah.
It's like what they did in Warlords, where like you finally get to see not Kilrog, what's his name? The guy with the missing one hand.
Oh, Blade Fist, yeah.
Yeah, and he's there for a little bit, and then he dies in the first raid, or like Ner'zhul is there and dies in one of the dungeons.
In a dungeon, he's a dungeon
Yeah.
boss.
Every time they do that, like it's so like iconic of WoW at this point, but it's like, come on, please let them live for a little longer, flush them out.
Yeah, it's very much redeem the characters we don't want redeemed and squander the characters that we want.
Yeah. Speaking of that too, like it's something I thought about recently since Anduin's been like brought up in the story and he's going to be like in the forefront and everything for the next 6 years or something. I really feel like that's something they squandered with him too, is because he's the one that makes that strategy to take out the king and everything. And he is very much a prince that was elevated to kingship, not because he wanted to be, but because his father died in a time of war. So he's basically made another one of him in that sense by killing Talanji's dad.
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of done the same thing to Talanji that had happened to him.
Yeah, and I feel like there could have been a strong story to tell there, especially with like moving towards a peace and an armistice and everything, but that wasn't their plan.
Yeah, there was a lot of interesting things about that whole story for sure. Especially with the whole where it seems like the Alliance has the upper hand throughout the entire battle, but then instead of staying, they just leave. So
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a part too that, like, you know, my partner really loves the Zandalari, really loves like the ideals and everything. Me and him, he wanted stuff from Battle of Dazar lore, and I was like, well, my highest character is on Alliance right now. So we went through the Alliance side, and he was very disheartened. There was like one point during the beginning where they're like, make sure you don't harm the civilians, and then you immediately harm the civilians going through to the first boss. And
Yeah, through like the merchant quarter. Yeah.
yeah,
It was something, that's for sure.
yeah, they definitely had some ideas about how to incense both sides back then.
100%. I feel like we could probably talk about this for hours, Kula, so I'm just going to say thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me speak.
Anytime, it was my pleasure. I enjoyed our conversation, and we will see you, along with all the other race reps, at the opening ceremony.
Goodbye.
Hello everyone, welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Goblin Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Emma's art studio on Twitter, but a lot of people know me on Moonguard USA as Pazzi Restigear or just Restigear.
Well, Pazzi, thank you so much for doing this interview with me. I'm going to move on to our first question, which is what made you choose Goblin as your race of choice?
I think I was inspired by different things. Like playing like a couple, like I think my first like Goblinoid character was from like a TTRPG, Pathfinder 3.5 edition. It was a Bugbear Ranger, and on top of also seeing other artists like draw their characters in World of Warcraft, and particularly I was a big fan of like Goblin-esque characters. So I started growing into like more to like more fantasy than just dragons. Um and then also like on top of that, like could you really think of like any other MMORPGs that has like pure goblin or goblinoid races like outside of like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder? I mean, the only thing I could probably think of is like Chuas from WildStar, which are like these gremlin little fuzzballs, and I appreciate them very much still. I and when I first started playing, like I really and still do enjoy like the starting zone for the Goblin race, and I was even really happy to re-experience the intro Horde quest to Miss Pandaria when the remix came out. Only just because like I like Laura Master Cho just getting to sit down with you and have tea, and then when he sees your ancestors in the mist, they're like up in flames and he's just trying to be polite, which is like which is hilarious. And honestly, just overall these goblins just have like a lot of like personality and lore stuff about them that I really love.
Yeah, World of Warcraft goblins have a wide variety of characters because I mean we have the Kazan goblins, who would be the ones that Cho saw in the flames through Kazan obviously being destroyed because of Deathwing, and then they joined the Horde. But before that, we have like neutral goblins and goblins we've seen long before World of Warcraft allowed you to play a goblin. I could tell from what you were talking about that obviously you've been a goblin fan, a goblinoid fan for a long time. You mentioned the first TTRPG that you played where you were a bugbear, which is kind of like a subspecies of like orcs and goblins, you know, from D&D perspective. And now you're playing a goblin WoW, and honestly World of Warcraft's probably one of the few MMORPGs out there that I know of that are maybe like the big MMORPGs that let you play goblin like you were saying.
Exactly.
Chuas are great. You know, I used to also play WildStar, and I loved running around in my little hamster ball. Chuas are just the cute little gremlins. It sounds like for a long time you've been passionate about goblins as a whole and have played many variety of goblins over the years. So please tell us more about what makes you so passionate about goblins.
A lot as like a lot of my opinion of what makes it passionate about this race has changed since like my interview from last year. Um and but still at the same time still keeping it simple. I feel like they can be like an underappreciated race, and that word being underappreciated could probably resonate with a lot of people, whether they are maining goblins or there's other races that feel the same way where they're not particularly popular. Um, you could say like the goblins from other people's perspectives, they're labeled as the silly race, maybe next to like gnomes or Vulpera. If you've seen a movie or a show where there's like a really smart character that has a lot of potential to do great things but wastes it on petty crimes, maybe I would think of like that kid from like Free Willy. And that's kind of how I see goblins as a whole. Like because you could still make like a greedy goblin if you want, but but honestly I just see them with like there's a lot of potential for them outside of like that stereotype, because at the end of the day they're still people like humans, elves, dwarves, orcs, etc. Like anyone, you and your character and my character, anyone could be kind, sweet, loving, or greedy, cunning, crafty. You can roleplay a goblin as like a greedy sleazebag or likes to run a flower shop. You know, I recently finished this amazing short story, The Goblin Way, that highlights a lot of why I love the race and that there's more potential. I don't want to like spoil it too much, but I know I can't squeeze everything in this interview. But trust me when I say it's worth like the 32 pages of your time. It's a huge refresher of seeing a short story dedicated to goblins and the idea of moving forward with new ideals for goblins that can adapt to and wanting to show their potential for the Horde and all of Azeroth. Which that kind of moves into like another reason why I probably really love this race is because like in general, maybe not just a goblin thing, like whether it's a dwarf, a gnome, Vulpera, hobbit, whatnot, is that I think like role playing a short race, it kind of makes their world much bigger to explore and challenging, whether it's like physically and or mentally. And I'm looking forward to roleplay Posy more, especially for Tournaments of Ages this upcoming next week.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to seeing you there. You made a lot of very, very good points. I think there's a lot of people who, when they see goblins, they kind of just think of Gallywix and the cartel, right? And like this mafioso style, greedy villain aspect to the goblins. When in reality, the goblins are much more than that. Like, even the cartels are much more than that. We've seen the Steamweedle cartels, and like the Steamweedle cartel isn't necessarily a bad cartel. They're not really vilified. They're trying to do good things. And we have the neutral goblins of Booty Bay, of Gadgesan. We have Gazlo, who is now the goblin representative for the Horde and wants to make the goblins better than what they were under Gallywix. There's so many different ways to roleplay goblins, right? Like you said, you could be a flower shop owner, you could be a greedy villain, you could be a healer, you could go and do whatever you want. You could go be on a ship, you could go, like, the sky's the limit. And a lot of, I think, the lore behind goblins is kind of misconstrued because a lot of people just, like I said, assume that it's the Gallywix goblins, which are from Kazan, and they're a very specific kind of goblin. But we have and have had goblins in World of Warcraft since vanilla, because we have the one that's in the SI7 helping the Alliance. We have neutral goblins. They've always been there. The Horde goblins specifically are the Kazan-based ones, mostly, from what we know. But you could take that and you could roll with it what you will. You could do what you will. The sky's the limit. You don't have to have your blinders on and be like, okay, the goblins are a stereotypical villain type jokester race, and some people might think they're like the funny guy race. They're just a funny little guy because they make things go boom. But like that's not the case, right? Like they're better engineers than just making their things blow up. We know that because we've seen the shredders. We've seen, I mean, Gazlo built the new Ogremar. Like, goblins can do big things for being little guys, and people need to look past that, right?
Even though the whole goblin starting zone in Kata was about us coming, like, in-game lore-wise, our goblins came from Bilgewater, therefore we're technically Bilgewater goblins. But funny, now that you mention all that, it feels like people can take things like I don't want to say take it too seriously. Like, you tell someone to do something, but very loosely, and then they say it, and then they keep that in mind, and that's like suddenly a law in their head now. Like, oh, we did these goblin starting zones from Bilgewater. Bilgewater goblins are Horde. Da 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 da. That's law. But like, it doesn't have to be. We're given, like you said, there's like so many other goblins out there, and that actually, honestly, you say it a little bit better than I could, because that just, I personally kind of forgot about that a little bit.
it
Just a tiny bit.
happens because when you're doing the starting zone, obviously your focus for the entire story is on one specific goblin, right? But there's been goblins around forever, so even though your character physically is ingrained in the game to a specific group because that's what we have to do, doesn't mean that your goblin, the character that you write, has to be
Exactly.
from there, right? And
I
the sky's the limit. You never know what you could do.
exactly. And I think like roleplay wise, I've had it where my goblin's parents were survivors from Kazan, but they lived almost like a steam Weedle lifestyle and were living in Ratchet and may or may not had 25 siblings in a tiny house after that. Don't know if half of them are blood related or not, but it was a packed house, let me tell you.
Yeah, exactly. Because all those refugees have to go somewhere, and not all of them are welcomed into Ogremar right away. You know, I mean, they kind of are because Thrall's the one who like brings you in, but in your own headcanon, they don't have to be, right? Like it doesn't matter what the game tells you. There's
Exactly.
certain things that we have to follow, and then there's certain things that we could diverge from. And one of those things is the classes we play, because obviously we could say that we play XYZ class, but with our roleplay, we could say that we're actually another class. So, with that being said, goblins have a decent amount of classes they could play, but if you were to look at all the classes across World of Warcraft, all of the classes across the World of Warcraft RPG and from various other fantasy settings, it doesn't matter the game, the setting, what class would you like to see goblins get?
It's kind of I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before about like goblins not just being one thing. And I still see the strong potential for uh goblins being druids. It kind of also ties into the idea of like that whole conversation we just had, and also the fact that World of Warcraft does take heavy inspiration from D&D. And as we all know in D&D, yes, there's modules that you could follow to run a game book by page, but you could, you know, it's also just up to the players to like make whatever race be a druid, goblin or not goblin. And I could and I know they're currently working on that, I believe, and it's probably going to take a long time, but I just hope that people could keep an open mind to that because again, not all goblins are bad, or they can't be all that bad. And maybe some want to preserve nature and learn the ways of druids.
We already see the nature aspect with goblin shamans, right? There are a lot of goblins in the Earthen
True.
Ring
Oh
who
yeah,
are,
you're right. True. And then also recently they added them as monks.
yeah,
So that's also another little step right there because
that
I think
that's
monks are
another
like,
element, right? That's chi is
Mhm.
like the fifth element. But
yeah,
so druids. I think anybody could be a druid. Personally, I think any class is
you could
bound
be
to
a
figure it
druid.
out because a lot of the races within World of Warcraft can be shamans. Shamans are inherently tuned to Azeroth as itself and all the elements, but there is a nature aspect there. So a lot of the cultures within Azeroth who use shamanism also have like a deep ingrained respect for nature and like the living world. So goblins are one of those races that have that class. So you never know, right? And druids is the one thing that I think everybody wants to see the race that they play get. And one of the reasons I think is because of the forms, right? Everybody wants that
Mhm.
personal form that identifies your race with the class, because every druid so far that we have has a different type of form. They're not all the same forms; they're different.
Mhm.
So I think druid would be an amazing pick because you never know what you'd be able to do with that goblin druid.
Mhm.
Uh,
And if we wanted to throw this in there, uh, I everyone's mentioned like the idea of a tinkerer class. That could I could also see that as well.
yeah,
That maybe takes inspiration from like the artificer class. And then and I don't know, maybe this could be more of a profession than a class, but I would say like bards, because if you think about it, like cooking professions to make buffs. We have like alchemy to make potions for people. I could see like if bards couldn't be a class, I could see them being like a professional for characters to pick up if they wanted to.
100%.
Because and it kind of ties into like that real aspect of like, like this warrior uses a blade, but as a professional hobby, he likes to play the flute.
Yeah, you never know what kind of hobby or perspective they might take that they could end up becoming this class. And I know Tinkerer has been one that people have been really dabbling over and wanting for a long time. I feel like every time there's an expansion reveal, we get that edited slideshow of like a gnome Tinkerer, and they're like, look what we've seen at BlizzCon, which is amazing. I think it would be a great class. I also think Bard would be great, and Bard and Tinkerer aren't the first to have been brought up. They aren't the first to have been brought up. So it'd be great to see all those. I think all three of those are an amazing choice. And now is kind of like the hard question I'm going to slide your way. At least sometimes it's hard for people. There are and have been a lot of goblins throughout the World of Warcraft universe. So with that being said, which goblin do you think is your favorite lore character?
Bring up the Goblin Way book again. That book, I think, it made me love
Gazlo, right? Yeah.
Gazlo. I keep forgetting that E is silent.
There
Gazlo.
Yeah.
And and so far his little assistant Noggenfogger, or Noggy, as he likes to call him in the books. And not to spoil too much again, because everyone's got to read it. You got to read it. I think I read like a little bit about his character before the book, not by much. But I did learn about like the Orgrimmar bit and the Garrison bit, like you mentioned before. So I think it's like the first time I've actually like looked at this character, but in a book format. And so it's just like, oh, this is like, it's like really great, and it kind of like pinpoints like similar views I would say like Posy would have ideally if they talked over a cup of Joe or something. And I am looking forward to Toa this year and the expansion that lies ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that everybody gets the appreciation they deserve, and we maybe see a lot more people come out from these interviews. I want to thank you again, Posy, for taking the time to do this. It was a great conversation and a great interview.
Absolutely.
And I will see you, along with all the other race reps, at the opening ceremony.
All right. I'll see you then.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Vulpera race rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Iska, and I'm the Vulpera representative this year.
Welcome, Iska. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I'm going to dive right in with the first question, and that is, what made you choose Vulpera as your race of choice?
You know, I totally didn't even intend to actually play a Vulpera. When they released, I just kind of went through the customization options, and then I found the little floppy ears and was like, oh no, I can make her have a cute little puppy face, and it all just sort of like unraveled from there.
Yeah, I feel like the cuteness factor and like the sort of fox-esque aesthetic to it is what a lot of people see, because they're like, oh my god, this thing's adorable, and then they make one. And then we have, Dolly and Dot being our best friends, and we just want to be Vulpera forever.
They're super addictive, and their animations, because, they're a newer allied race, so their animations are fantastic, and they have very good fur textures, and they're just, very, visually satisfying to play.
Yeah, they are one of the newer ones, like you said, and they do have a lot more stuff when it comes to animation. They had a lot of the newer stuff. Their customizations are pretty good, too. You can make them look hella cute and hella how you want them to be, that makes you feel aesthetically pleasing, pleased, if that makes sense, because you want to look at your character and be like, I like this makes me happy. I don't think anyone ever wants to look at their character and feel disappointed.
An experience that quite a lot of us playing World of Warcraft have felt over the years.
Yeah, I don't miss old dwarf models.
I imagine.
But moving on from that, what makes you so passionate about the Vulpera?
My favorite thing about Vulpera, for sure, is that in a game that just has, decades at this point, basically, of lore behind it, or a world that has decades of lore behind it, Vulpera are like a blank slate. We know almost nothing about them. We have a few aesthetic clues in Vol'dun, and we have a few, history with the Sethrak, and living in a blighted land. But we don't know, like, why do they have access to the classes that they have access to? What sort of like social structure beyond just caravans do they have? What are their caravans like? We know almost nothing. We've got like one little story in the fairy tales book that came out last year, and that's like it. So it's like it's very free for people to create their own headcanons and all share them without conflicting with each other, because you get this culture where people just go, oh, well, that's how it was in my Vulpera's caravan.
Right, it's a culture of nomads, basically, and the sky's the limit with what you can do, because what we see is they could be good trackers, they could be good apothecaries, because we see like the poisons and stuff being made, right? We know that they could be good fighters, and we don't really know much, like you said, beyond the caravan life, which is them just moving from camp to camp with their very fun animals that they have, their little fuzzy friends that we all love and adore.
That's right. Our alpacas and our hyenas.
Exactly. And, Blizzard hasn't given them a whole lot since introducing them. They do have some
Certainly
good
not.
stories, but maybe we'll see more, it would certainly be
maybe,
nice.
but I do kind of love that. I love that they're a race where people who like, cultivating their own little circles of headcanon can do that and still be plausibly within, the scope of the lore of the whole game. And then also you don't have to argue with each other. Like you've got Vulpera with last names, when that's not dictated in the game, but there's plenty of room for people to do that if they want to, elaborate titles and things like that.
Right, like not one person's character is more right than the other. You could all just
Yeah,
have
exactly.
fun with it.
It attracts a type of person that is very satisfying to roleplay with, because they're more self-starting, I've found, than a lot of other, not to say, that's not in other communities in Warcraft, but I've run into a lot of it with Vulpera players, and it's always like a very, it's very satisfying world building that I love.
Right. I mean, a lot of the other races have been long since established. Like you said, there's been a couple decades of written lore, right? And even then, not all of them have a lot that are established, but a majority of them have like a set community and a set way to do things already. And not a lot of people tend to branch out from that norm, Some people might bring in ideas from outside the game, and that causes a whole interesting thing. But the Vulpera are the one clean slate where you could do what you want and have fun doing it and not be judged about it. So it's very nice to see. I like seeing all the fun Vulpera that I have met throughout many years of being at Tournament of Ages. So it's very good to see more of them about, and I hope that you guys get more story going forward.
I do too. Yeah, but if we don't, I'm very satisfied with the community that we've built and the Vulpera lore that all of us have built together.
And honestly, that's what matters the most. Now, you were talking about we don't even know why they have the classes that they have, which actually could lead into one of my follow-up questions. It doesn't have to be a class from World of Warcraft or the WoW RPG. It could be from any fantasy setting that you could think of. What class would you like to see the Vulperas get, and why?
Oh, wow. I mean, I have so many answers to this. I'm not even joking. Like, it would be very hard for me to narrow it down, because of course I would love to see Vulpera paladins. We have Vulpera priests. We know there's room for that there. I'd love to see Vulpera druids, but I would also love to see, with Vulpera and maybe several other races in the game too, like a like an alchemist tinker sort of class. That's not a great name for it because alchemy is already a trade in Warcraft. But I would love to see something like that, like kind of like an artificer in D&D 5e. Would be a very cool vibe for a desert scavenger character.
Now, surprisingly, Artificer, this isn't the first time that someone's mentioned it. It's come up a couple times in other interviews, and I always think it's a great choice. And I think Artificer or Tinkerer would be great to see with the Vulpera. Maybe Tinkerer having a certain, I guess, like class specialization for maybe potion making and all that sort of stuff, to tap into that side. But sky's the limit, right? A Druid would be cool, obviously, because you get to pick all your different forms. So it's like, would your travel form
Exactly.
be an alpaca?
Get my alpaca travel form going.
Would your cat form be a hyena? Would your bird form be a buzzard? Like there's just, it's like, what would their bear form be?
But see, it's so evocative that even not as a Vulpera player, you can pull that right off the top of your head because they have such strong imagery associated with them.
Yeah, very true. That's the one thing though that I think, from what I've talked about anyways, because Druids come up probably the most out of every class, which I'm not surprised about. People like to sit down and pick each other's brains when it comes to what forms their race is going to get, right? Because like each Druid each Druid form is specific to that race. So for Vulpera, it's got my gears going again. All these interviews got my brain working overtime on Druid forms and just trying to figure out what would be what. But Artificer, hands down, I think, is a great choice for Vulpera.
Oh yeah, I absolutely would love to see a Tinker, especially with Tinker, being hypothetically several different races in Warcraft, and being able to flavor like their potion effects and stuff like that specifically to Vulpera, or their scavenging, like whatever little I'm thinking of like turrets and stuff like that for machinist in Final Fantasy 14 right now is what I'm thinking of. But I'm like, what if we had like weird little things that they found in the desert and assembled, and that's what your little turrets or whatever looked like? It'd be very cool.
And it could be like the Tinkerer is maybe the one who takes care of all the caravans, right? Fixes and patches all the wagons and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like we just don't know much about who does that. Does everybody help to do that? Is there a specific person? Like that person could be the Tinkerer, right?
Yeah, we have no idea how, other than the implication that they would have begun as family groups that just accepted other people that wandered through the desert. We have no idea how caravans are socially constructed.
Yeah, and caravans actually bring up two of my favorite Vulpera characters, but not really, because I'm going to cheat because they're alpacas. But Dolly and Dot.
Correct.
Dolly and Dot are my best friends. So who out of the Vulpera is your favorite lore character?
Boy, it's tough because we do have quite few of them compared to almost everybody else. We've got one little racial hub with 4 or 5 Vulpera characters. Gosh, I really don't know. I kind of appreciate all of them in the sense that each of them takes one core trope. You've got the like horrible little, ferocious assassin. You've got the, Kiro, the like sensible, like actually being helpful guy that was the sort of core of the Horde's Vulpera allied race, not allied race, but their recruitment quest. Each of them like brings one core trope that paints like a picture of Vulpera as a whole race. So it's kind of hard for me to pick a favorite. Oh, we can't forget the Bilge-Rat pirates either. That's another very popular roleplay trope for Vulpera, is playing a Bilge-Rat.
Yeah, you guys are all kind of like in one area, like you were saying. We have them in Vol'dun. Apart from like the dungeon where we see a Bilge-Rat pirate, we don't really see them making their mark outside of like that area from Battle for Azeroth, right? Like they're kind of restricted to this small dune space that keeps them safe, but there's not really like, I guess, a major player in comparison to everyone. I want to say like they all are equal in their society, right?
Yeah. Like you do have like I guess that ultimately that is the standout for me is Captain Eudora, even though she interestingly has the old Vulpera model before it was changed to the new skeleton
Ooh.
with the new tail and new textures that the actual players have. She's pretty cool. I do like her out in the brief 5-second boss fight that you have with her, and that's basically it. But she's still a cool little, oh wait, Vulpera can be this too, sort of cue.
Yeah, they could get out and do whatever they want to, just like any other race. They're not just like this feeble fox race that's stuck to one part of a desert, off on some island somewhere. They could go and do literally whatever they want. They could run one of the most feared pirate crews on Azeroth and be one of the 3 captains, It's
Yeah, I like that. I like that they're at the beginning of their story as far as, being part of Azeroth.
Very true. And hopefully we'll see more from them soon. You never know with the War Within what characters are going to pop up. That's one thing I like about new expansions is you'll just be going through, you'll be doing something, you'll stop into an inn or you'll go to this side quest and you just look around and suddenly there's a character that you know and like and you're like, "Huh? Wait, what are you doing here?"
Yeah. I love that in Dragonflight. I love that you get a Vulpera Kirin Tor apprentice who's been actively studying magic as hard as they can ever since they left the dunes. You get Vulpera who are part of the expedition, that are going and doing the mountain climbing dailies and stuff like that. I love that. Like they're slotting them into everything because they're learning about what they can be in the world.
You even get a red dragon who chooses a Vulpera form with the major domo.
That's right. I loved that. Like that was that was a very cool cue. That also another very common. Sorry, everyone. role playing choices. There's a lot of Vulpera dragon visages, and they're all the ones I've met have been fantastic.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people do like their dragons, which, hey, nothing wrong with that. You could play around a lot with your visage form because, actual dragons aren't restricted to just the half elf-esque kind of models. But yeah, no, I hope that we see a lot more from the Vulpera. I've had a pleasure talking to you about the Vulpera, and hopefully we'll talk more about them down the line.
Yeah.
You never know. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. This was super fun. I had a great time, and I will always talk about Vulpera at length at any time.
Heck yes. Well, Iska, thank you so much. We will see you along with the other race reps at the opening ceremonies for the Tournament of Ages.
Thank you. Bye.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Undead Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Estrella, and I play Leah Nocturne of Wormrust Accord.
Welcome. Thanks for taking the time to do this. We're just going to hop right into the first question. What made you choose Undead as your race of choice?
Back in Cataclysm, I was recruited into an Undead guild. I originally played Orcs and Taurens. I've been playing as Undead ever since, and my old monikers such as Poodle Zombie and my more popular one known as Zombier added to my love fuel for all things Undead. I was drawing zombies long before I started writing and playing World of Warcraft.
Very nice. So the aesthetic very much suited what you were looking for and what you liked?
Oh yes, very much so.
Awesome. So adding on to that, I guess, would you say that's what makes you so much passionate about the race, or just expand on what makes you passionate about it?
Well, the concept of undead as a whole is absolutely fascinating to me. Honestly, think I could talk about the wonderful things that general media has done with them from the start of the concept of undead to all the amazing things they've done with undead today. I find the undead to be monstrous and inhuman in most cases, but I also love the idea that there are undead out there trying to feel more living. They're trying to find a part of them that they lost. Much like the character that I entered this tournament with, Leah. Zombies and undead in general are one of my greatest artistic inspirations and passions, and the Warcraft undead are the more interesting since they're not the classic brains trope that you see in most modern horror media that you see. And in times past, Warcraft undead, they think, they feel, Nearly all of them know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, they very much have their own unique personality and appearance compared to like traditional media undead. You know, like not all of them are just like you said, mindless zombies that eat brains.
Yeah, they're
and their
not
flesh
mindless
is peeling.
zombies.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
They have their own aesthetic, their own identity, and the lore is just building them up even more in WoW, and they're definitely branching away from that traditional media, which is
Yes,
very
I
nice to see.
absolutely adore that. It's wonderful.
All right. Well, that is awesome. I mean, I agree with all that. It's nice to see an like undead race that just isn't a decaying husk or something like that. That being said, the Forsaken are one of the races I think that has a majority of the classes in World of Warcraft unlocked. So, if your race could be any class, now it doesn't have to just be classes from World of Warcraft. It could be classes from any fantasy game or stuff like that. What class would you want the Forsaken to have? Like, which one would you be?
Druid, hands down. Druid or shapeshifter. I mean, either one of those work. I absolutely love druids. I love the concept of being able to shapeshift into any animal or being able to summon like this sun moon magic or any kind of magic that you really want it to be. But I think that what would be really cool is like a skeletal cat with like a little bit of flesh hanging off of it coming up to destroy its enemies. I think it would be just horrifying. um if they released undead druids, I'd change to that in an instant with absolutely no hesitation at all.
And you know, like, their bear form would 100% be a plague bear.
Oh god, yes, yes. Or that frick, what's that movie with that undead bear that has that like spooky talking voice? The like Revenant? No, that's not it. Maybe. I forgot what it is, but I think most people might know.
For sure. Any form of, like, undead bear would be epic.
Oh
Druid's
yeah, it would be
definitely,
so scary. I love the idea of like an undead bear.
for
I
sure.
actually made a Tauren because I just loved their forms so much.
They have some of the nicer druid forms, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Druid's definitely a good choice. I would be interested to see what an undead druid would look like, how it would work, and just, like, the lore behind it. Because, like, death and nature magic you don't normally see go hand in hand, but I feel like it would work. They would get it to work in a very interesting way.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Personally, I think that they would use the opposite magic. Or they could go real crazy with it and take that thing from the RPG and, you know, they recycle a lot of things from the RPG sometimes, even though it's technically not canon. Sometimes if they don't have any lore, they'll use lore from that. And they could go with like Echo of Life stuff and it could be like an arcane based druid.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, the RPG does have a lot of flavor that would be nice in the current lore. That they should definitely like go back and look over a lot more to see what they could make work and what they could bring in. They have all that info sitting there, right? That they just need to tap into.
I know, right? It drives me crazy that they don't go back and look at it right now and just take some stuff and fill in the gaps of what they're missing right now.
Yeah, for real. So speaking of lore, the Undead have got some new-ish characters over the, past couple of expansions. They have some deeply rooted characters in World of Warcraft lore. With that being said, out of all the Undead lore characters in game, which is your favorite?
Lillian Voss. By far, from the start of her story to where she is now, she shows true progress of undead as people. Her loving acceptance for those that are newly risen and those that have lost it, in Undeath, is something that was missing in World of Warcraft for a very long time. I look up to her more than any other Forsaken lore character. She's wonderful. She makes sure the Forsaken feel like people and not just a personal army like Sylvanas made it out to be in Cataclysm going forward.
Yeah, and I've played the Undead story. I've done I think everything except for the heritage quest line. But I like how you really see Lillian develop from like that. I used to be like a member of the Scarlet Crusade or whatever to hating myself and what I am to not wanting to exist to developing into this like staple member of like the undead community who wants to see them become more than just an undead army that like hates itself and doesn't want to like
Yeah,
be seen in the
exactly.
world. You know, they know that they have their own identity and that they're a people that deserve to be heard, and she just builds them up.
I know the character development for Lillian Voss is absolutely phenomenal, and I think that's another reason that I really look up to her as a character.
I remember her making that grand reveal in Scarlet Monastery from being the hooded figure to Lillian Voss and getting the rune
Oh
blades.
God, yes.
That was pretty epic. That's a great choice. I really like her as a Forsaken lore character and as a character in general. She's definitely been one of the, I think, staple characters in the game, especially as of late, and just one of the more interesting
Absolutely.
ones. You know, she's a badass.
She really is.
All right. Well, Leah, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, it's no problem. It's been a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure, and we will see you during the opening ceremonies. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Nightborne Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, folks. This is Sansari Vosenu. I always say it wrong, I'm sure. Coming at you from the Nightborne.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this, Sansari. I'm going to jump in with the first question. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Perfect. What made you choose Nightborne as your race?
Well, Nightborne supremacy. I absolutely loved playing Night Elves. That's actually what I started on back in vanilla. And then when the Nightborne came out and we saw Suramar and this entire world of elves that pretty much continued where the Night Elves left off, like they went into the forest and they sought nature. This is a group that fully embraced everything that dealt with magic and the arcane and, you know, building a world that just kind of continued beautifully in stagnation. It like an old crumbling kingdom, and I just had to join. I had to see what this would be like, and ever since, it has been my absolute favorite mix of magic and high society and savagery.
I remember when Suramar got introduced during the Warlords of Draenor introduction. Everyone was so hyped with that city. It looked amazing, and I mean, it was one of the best parts of Legion. That is for sure, hands down. Now, you mentioned a lot of things about the Nightborne. Obviously, there's a lot of passion behind what you were talking about, so let's dive into what
Yes.
makes you so passionate about the Nightborne, and maybe you could expand upon some of the topics you touched on.
Oh, absolutely. They never gave up on magic, on the arcane, and delving into the absolute limits. And in some ways, they follow a very technological aspect, almost cyberpunk for a fantasy setting. Which, I mean, if you love cyberpunk, this is the place to be. Is Nightborne. They mix magic into everything, even every single race, or not every race, but every class pretty much has magic touching into it somehow. The religion is very different. You have to rethink it all. They're not very tied to a loom, so what do they follow? And it gives you an opportunity to rethink elves and rethink history when you've been hooped up under what I call the fishbowl in RP for so very long. Some things that I absolutely love and make me wild about this is not just the magic and technology, but those questions of philosophy. I don't see them as being very religious, but very philosophical. And they embrace art, poetry. It's all innate to the experience of Nightborne, and I love art. It fills my day life. So this was a chance to really embrace, my own sides and loves of writing and art in a character that to me just far surpassed anyone else. And I mean, they look freaking cool too.
That they do look amazing, and it's interesting that you do mention philosophy, because you do see it throughout basically the entirety of Suramar and all the quest chains that you're doing there, including the raid that's in Legion for Suramar itself. They have their astrologians, they have their scientists, they have their artists, they have their winemakers, all these different aspects of the city, even their politics. You could see how their philosophy just fills their daily lives. And there's a lot of deeply rooted things there. They're survivors, like you
Yes.
mentioned. They've lived in the fishbowl for something like 10,000 years, so they haven't really
Yeah.
had a son or anything like that, and then coming out of that fishbowl, they're swarmed with the Legion all over again, who they put up that fishbowl to try and avoid and not have corrupt their society. And they go through that whole trial and tribulation of their leader turning to people that they tried to defend themselves from for so long. So like it's just a whole complex story with them for sure in Legion, but there's so much to their society, so much to their culture, so much to them as a people that you get to
Yes.
witness throughout the entirety of the Legion quest lines, and even now in World of Warcraft, because it's not like Blizzard introduced them and then was like, okay, bye, you guys could step away now. We see Thalisra throughout many of the stories. We get to explore more aspects of the Nightborne, obviously, with a lot of the, I guess, heritage quests, and just going back to be able to actually take our time to read all the old quests and go into Suramar and find those little niche things that we might have not noticed before.
Oh, absolutely. Like they have touches now all over the place. Anytime the Horde want to go somewhere, they pretty much are fetching a ride from the Nightborne. Thalysra was there with taking them into Nashatar to seek out, Ashara. Like they have kind of been a running thread, and now there is the first ever, two elven peoples that are going to be joining as king and queen are marrying between the Blood Elves and Suramar.
Right, with the marriage of Lorthamar and Thulurser, we now have
Yeah.
the pact between the Nightborne and the Blood Elves, right? So it'll be interesting to
Sure.
see what happens. And you mentioned how the Nightborne pretty much travel the Horde places, and that probably has a lot to do with Oculith and his portals, because it's like the Nightborne
Oh,
are just like masters of portal magic.
yeah, it's been incredible to see where it's going, and Midnight is bound to be wild when we get there.
Midnight's going to be good, and it's been brought up in a couple of other interviews, so I think there's a lot of hype behind it for elf players and just players in general.
Heck yeah.
Now, obviously, you've mentioned science is a key aspect of Nightborne. They have a lot of technology. We've seen that throughout quests. So, with that being said, if the Nightborne could be any class, it doesn't have to be a World of Warcraft class that they don't have. It could be from the WoW RPGs. It could be from any fantasy setting. What would you like to see them get as a class?
Well, my answer has always been Tinkerer. I think that's at the heart of it, but a magical Tinkerer like Magitech, which I love to do with my character. But I'm gonna go out there because of recent things in Dragonflight and some RP I've been doing. Bard would also fit really well. Uh, like I said, culture is completely tied around music and poetry and creating a story, and because they didn't really have much to do and their history was kind of cut off. It was the history of, like, if New York City had a magical dome on it and you were told you could never leave, what would happen? And that is why they turned to art so much. I think Bard would be fantastic.
I think Bard is an amazing choice and suits the Nightborne really, really well. Because, like you were saying, they were trapped in the dome, right? So their history at that point was lost to not only them, I guess, prior to that, but to the world. The world just figured all of the Highborn had been flushed away that weren't the Blood Elves going to Quel'Thalas and all that stuff. So they had to make up their own culture within the dome and try and keep their history alive, their traditions alive. So a lot of it was just kept in there so close, and I think the best way they could talk about it and tell it would be through music and a bard. So I think that's an amazing choice.
Heck yeah.
And that's actually the second time someone's mentioned bard in the interview, so you're not the first one.
Yeah, we need some bards. I mean, I'd say pictomancer, but that's because I just love to draw.
That's a slight, no bias there at all, right, Sansa?
Oh, not at all.
Tinker has also been mentioned before, and I think that would be a great choice, but someone mentioned Tinkerer and Artificer, and I think both those could work. But your choice of Bard is definitely up there for a lot of reasons that I think are deeply ingrained with the Nightborne culture and the Nightborns as we know them.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean, it would be cool to see a paladin because they have to question what do they believe in now, but
yeah, like where would they get that light from, right?
yeah.
Because that would be pretty interesting.
Pretty crazy.
Now, of course, throughout Legion, we've seen many Nightborne characters, whether it's in the main Suramar quest line or some side quests or even profession quests. That being said, out of all the Nightborne lore characters, who's your favorite lore character?
Well, it's still kind of caught between two. Of course, Runas, because you work with him when he's at the edge and limit of his life. But in Dragonflight, for those that are trying to remember some of the quests, Runas is the withered that is hungering and falling apart and needs the arcane so terribly. And you're going through Azuna with him, and at the end, when he gets to the ancient blue dragon, he finally gets his arcane fix, but also accepts the end and fades away. And that's very difficult for elves, especially Nightborne, to deal with. When they deal with people, they kick them out and, well, you got to make and break it as a withered. But in Dragonflight, you get to see Runas before the withering. In the tier quest lines, when you're going to Elisand in a scenario to get the memory of Tyr, he's working in the library right there under the astrologians and the astrologers. And that, if you don't walk around and take a time, you might miss him, but you can talk to him and he has some things to say. And that just blew me away. It was like, oh, wow. He was one of the most trusted advisors to Elisand. You learn more about him. The other one is the astrologer Jaren. Now, for those who do the Nighthold raid, he's just the guy you gotta kill to get the key to go up and fight the astrologer, the one that goes and summons and opens the way and shows you all the worlds beyond Azeroth as you fight him. If you sit in the Nighthold raid long enough, he will actually start pulling up planets that had titans in them in his illusion and tell you about them. I didn't realize that till I was going AFK once and while I was, TMOG running, and started listening and watching him, and it was like, holy smokes. He's revealing some serious lore dumps.
I actually didn't realize that, but oh my god, I'm gonna have to go through now and sit there and just watch to see what planets pop up.
Absolutely. And the planets he pulls up, if you go into the new Karazhan 5-man, where you're returning to the Karazhan crypts in Legion, and you get to the librarian's section of that dungeon, some of the planets that he's pulling up are in there.
Ooh, we love long form storytelling, okay, and hints here and there.
Yeah,
all right.
So I highly recommend folks maybe go check into that. It's real interesting, and it's spicy. That's gonna come up. You know it. I mean, we're going into the war within.
Exactly, it's definitely gonna have to come up.
Yeah, maybe there's some hints in there that are about to pop up.
you never know what Blizzard's gonna do. But Runis, God, makes me cry, my boy. When I saw him again, it was an emotional roller coaster. And when you talk to him, you could be like, "I know you," and he's like, "Sorry, I don't know who you're talking about." And you're like, "It's okay, my friend.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it." Yeah, no, both great characters. There's a lot that I think people are gonna have to go through after listening to this to check themselves. I know I'm definitely gonna be going to look at the globes and worlds.
Yeah,
And
it's
yeah.
some wild stuff.
I think all of your picks have been amazing. Nightborns are awesome. And with that, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this interview.
Thank you very much. Absolutely loved it, and I think this is my 3rd year
Yeah, I think so.
of Nightborne, and I just want to say thank you to everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure to really play out Nightborne and to talk to folks about them, and hope to see more of them. In fact, we're going to. So keep your eyes peeled.
And with that, we will see you and all the other race reps at the opening ceremonies. Hello everyone, and welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Blood Elf Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Moo, and I play Calria Sun Whisper, formerly Calria Dawnbrook, who is a Sindori Paladin.
Thank you for taking the time to do this. I'm going to jump right into our first question, and that is, why did you choose Blood Elf as your race?
Oh gosh, well, I've played World of Warcraft since 2005, but for the longest time, I actually mained a Night Elf and a Tauren Druid, like up until Legion, I think. And then sadly, I had to step away for a bit from WoW to focus on college, you know, and then when I came back, I had no idea like what I wanted to play or to do, and I didn't really know people like in the roleplay community. So after some consideration, I decided I wanted to try rolling a Blood Elf. Gosh, I had always wanted to play one since Burning Crusade, because that's like kind of around the time I really got into WoW. The Blood Elf priestess, you know, in the Burning Crusade cinematic kind of lives rent-free in my brain in 2024. And I always loved how complex the Sindori are and their relationship with magic. And I know I enjoyed playing a paladin briefly during Icecrown Citadel, so I thought maybe it would be fun to play like an ex-Blood Knight, you know, trying to find their place in the world, especially since BFA was becoming a thing. So I thought, okay, so like maybe like an ex-Blood Knight who is like a deserter during the Fourth War. And so that's kind of how Calria came into being.
Oh, okay. Wow, yeah. So you've been playing WoW for a long time.
Yeah, almost 20 years.
Yeah, and I mean, when you were playing, Blood Elf probably wasn't a playable race yet, right? So
No, it wasn't. It was it's I think it came out in 2007.
Yeah, I
so
think
it took me a while to finally roll one. So
But it sounds like a lot of things leading up to that point is what really like jumped to you. Like you said, that Blood Elf priestess and that amazing cinematic from back in BC.
Oh my God.
It's just
I know
so
when
good.
she like grips the mana worm and takes the magic. I still think of that and rewatch some of the older cinematics because they're just super metal.
Some of the older cinematics are really, really good too. I hope they start revamping a lot of the older ones, kind of like what they did for the Arthas cinematic. It would be cool to see them go and revamp a lot of the older cinematics for sure.
Yeah, I would love that.
So I guess a lot of what you said kind of relates to my next question, which would be what makes you so passionate about the Blood Elves?
Well, like I said, I didn't really get into them until much later. I didn't start playing one until the very start of BFA. But I think overall, you know, Sindori are kind of complicated and messy, and I like that. You know, I thought it was really cool how they would sate their hunger for magic by pulling it from others and other creatures and beings. You know, again, messy and awful and kind of evil, you know, and to start. And their paladins are unique in that they would pull the light from another source, which was kind of fucked up. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't probably say that. And I wanted to, explore that relationship, like with my own character, and see, like, what's that like, and how does someone think about that, especially as the blood elves as a whole are changing. And now I kind of like where the Sindori are currently, with a lot of them struggling to find their place with the renewed Sunwell and trying to heal Quel'Thalas, and it feels kind of different from how they were when Burning Crusade originally launched, when they were certainly as a whole not really the good guys, even if a lot of their intentions maybe were in the right place. And they also have a lot of history in World of Warcraft as a whole, and I'm really eager to see where that takes them come midnight. So that's exciting.
Yeah, they complicated and messy definitely describes the history of the Blood Elves, especially their starting zone.
Yup, there's a lot there.
And with what their prince made them do, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Teaming up with Illidan and all that during the Burning Crusade, but like not actually teaming up with Illidan, but and then getting that hunger for Fel, and obviously the destruction of the Sunwell, and then the renewal of the Sunwell. Midnight's gonna bring a lot of awesome stuff, and I hope it completely fixes Silvermoon, so we don't have like that just destroyed portion that's like the starting area, and then it's still connected to the main city.
I know a lot of. I'm really hoping, I know it's gonna be elf focused, but I also hope we get like an Azure Mist or like a Draenei city revamp too, along like a whole Burning Crusade kind of revamp that's desperately needed when so many assets are just baked poorly. We can't fly in Eversong, so I'm sure they're gonna introduce, like the flying with that. But yeah, having like a revamped Silvermoon as maybe like a hub would be fantastic, and seeing some more lore come with that and some more like RP, in that area. Kind of like with sorry if this is a tangent, like with what happened with Gilneas, it's made me so happy to see kind of a consistent roleplay community gathering Gilneas the last couple months, and I hope we can see that with Quel'Thalas with Midnight.
It would definitely be very nice to see, and flying would be nice. I know why we can't fly there, because like the areas aren't phased into the actual overworld or whatever, so hopefully they fix that. But there's definitely a lot to come, so Blood Elf enjoyers are going to be eating good. I think Elf enjoyers in general are going to be really enjoying themselves come midnight. I'm hoping that we get a lot of stuff revamped, like you said, and it brings a lot of roleplay and places for the community to just gather, because Gilneas is popping off, which is very nice.
Yeah, I'm really, really hoping for that. And yeah, elf enjoyers are going to be eating really good. And I hope dwarf enjoyers are going to be eating good with War Within, along with oh god, what is it? I'm gonna mess it up. I think it's Arathi.
The Arathi, yeah.
The Arathi, yeah, that's gonna be sick.
It is gonna be great for sure. Now the Blood Elves are one of the races. You guys have quite a lot of classes that you could choose from compared to like some of the other races. I know we've got a lot more classes added on to a lot of races recently, but if there are any races that the Blood Elves, not races, classes that the Blood Elves can't be, either in WoW or from any other like RPG setting, what would you like to see added, and what would you be?
Oh, that's a hard question. I always thought Blood Elf Druid would be really fun. I've actually seen some role players have like their own kind of personal take on it, which was always really fun. And I just think maybe I'm not sure what their relationship with nature would be. It's probably not the best given everything they've done. But just from an aesthetic standpoint, I think Blood Elves would have some beautiful druid forms to pick from. Like you have the Trents with the lighter bark and kind of like the fall yellowy leaves. That would be awesome. And then you have like I believe it's like the spring paw pets and stuff like that. But I think ultimately, personally, if there was like any class I could pick from anything, it would be like a battle mage class for Blood Elves. I want a magister class similar to Red Mage, where you can get up close and personal with enemies while fighting with a blade. And I remember seeing Art of Kel'Thas forever ago, I don't know, back in like 2008, where he's dressed in his Dalaran robes and he wields a beautiful sword, and I think that's probably where that thought stemmed from. And sadly, my character's really bad with magic and would make a really poor battle mage, but I think it would be amazing to have that as like a class in World of Warcraft. And I feel like it's a possibility of them introducing some sort of like red mage, battle mage class into the game.
Yeah, the mix of melee and magic is always very nice. That is a very nice aspect of red mage. And druid seems to be that popular class that everybody just wants, because I think it's a big part of it has to do with all the unique forms, right? It adds like a uniqueness to the druids and the like race and class themselves. Flying form, it would be sick to see Dragonhawk, obviously, for like blood elves.
Oh
That'd be
yeah,
sick.
I could see that. Yeah.
There's just so many possibilities. Yeah, druid's a very good choice. Battle mage would be epic. We did kind of get Kael'thas' sword, I think, in Legion.
We did, yeah. So I guess like it is already a thing, I believe, for mages in the game, because I've never actually played a mage in WoW. And Legion, like I said, I wasn't super around because of college. But yeah, like we get Kael'thas' sword, and I was like, oh, I want there to be some sort of like melee magic class, and I guess they sort of introduced it with Evoker is sort of mid-range in a way, but not in the way that we like quite want, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a possibility they might explore in the future. I just don't know how they'll do it.
It would certainly be nice to see.
Yeah.
Now with Blood Elves, you guys have a lot of major players in the World of Warcraft universe when it comes to characters. Yeah. Which lore character from the Blood Elves is your favorite character?
It's difficult. I think for the longest time, if you ask me in general, like who's my favorite character overall, I always say Arthas. But in terms of Blood Elves, I really love what they've done with like Lor'themar in the last 2 expansions, and I hope to kind of see more of him and more development, especially come Midnight. And I also really love his relationship with Thalyssra, but my favorite Blood Elf overall would be Kael'thas, and I know that's probably kind of cliche to say, but like he's been in the franchise, I believe, since Warcraft 3 for like a really long time. And like a lot of Warcraft villains, he ultimately succumbed to evil, trying to do what he could to protect his people, and what he ultimately thought was the right thing, much like Arthas did. And I think that makes him interesting. It made me really happy when we got to adventure with him for a bit in Shadowlands and get his opinion on things. And it was one of the very few things I liked about Shadowlands. And you learn that as horrible and evil as Kael'thas had become, as much as he had changed, his biggest regret was that he wasn't at Silvermoon when it fell. And like he still carried that guilt like several decades later, even in death. And it was really fun to get to experience that in that expansion, and it made me think a lot about him. Also his mounts that drops from the raid, it's still one of my favorites. Alar, that hasn't dropped for me yet, but maybe that'll change. Would love that mount.
It is a very nice mount.
It is. Very low drop rate though.
That is true. Kael'thas is honestly a great choice because, like you said, he's a leader who might have done bad but really cares for his people, and you could really tell that in the writing and like the storytelling of his character. No matter what he did, it was for his people. It was never for just him. It was for the redemption of his people, for the future of his people. He wanted to make sure that the Blood Elves weren't just gonna be wiped away and disappear.
Yeah, I mean, he saw that they were suffering and having those horrible magic withdrawals, and they were dying, and he made some choices, that's for sure, but they were coming from a place of wanting to do good, like a lot of villains, and unfortunately he just ended up making the wrong choices. But I think that's what makes him interesting. And it's fun that we did get to see him a couple times, kind of like how Arthas reappears. But now I kind of hope that he's given some rest in the franchise. Like I think we saw his whole character arc and we saw him in death, and so now I think it's time to let him rest. And I'm excited for what is going to come for Lor'themar, and I hope we don't see him killed off, because I am really enjoying him.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of good with Lor'themar. He's one of my favorite racial leaders for sure, and I do hope that they kind of don't bring Kael'thas back either. I feel like his character ended in a proper way and he could just, go and rest and relax and do his thing in the Shadowlands, and
Yeah.
doesn't have to be yoinked into our eternal conflict of Azeroth.
As what Blizzard likes to do with bringing, long-standing characters back from the dead. And I'm like, just let them die, let them rest, let them stay.
If they're not coming back from the dead, they're being redeemed, apparently. So.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
But that is what it is. Hopefully, we see a lot. I want them to eventually maybe make Lorthamar no longer Regent Lord, but instead like actual leader, like straight up just King of the Blood Elves or Prince of the Blood Elves, like Kael'thas was.
Ooh. Maybe we'll see something like that in Midnight, like towards the end. Like maybe he proves himself, and I mean he already has, but maybe he does become more than just Regent Lord, because it's been that way for a very long time.
Yeah, and I totally get why he is. He was like one of the last highest ranking surviving people after the fall of Silvermoon and everything. But
right.
Yeah, maybe we'll see some further development with him and Thalisra. That would be nice.
Oh, I hope so, because I really do enjoy them.
All right, well, Caloria, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Of course, thank you so much for having me and for interviewing me.
It's our pleasure, and we will see you at the opening ceremonies with the rest of the race reps.
I will see you there.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages High Mountain Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Tarshal Ebenhorn of the Duskwatch Saber Guard, here representing for the High Mountains.
Well, Tarshal, I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. I'm going to jump right in with our first question, which is, what made you choose High Mountain as your race?
I chose High Mountain because I generally love all the various customs, the rituals they do, honoring both their ancestors and bringing honor wherever they go.
Yeah, and with that, you could see a lot of similarities between the High Mountain and the regular Tauren, right? Like, they still have that very honor-based society, and their heritage and customs are pretty similar with how they honor their dead and their ancestors and the Earth Mother, all that stuff. Obviously, the High Mountain, they honor more like Anshe and the birds and all that stuff. But there is definitely some distinct similarities that you could see between them, so that's very cool. And could you expand on what makes you so passionate about the High Mountain?
I think it's generally that feel that they give me. It's when it comes to most races, they're not the ones that are built in like heavy cities and all that. They're very spread out and they're very family orientated. So you can see a lot of people looking at more like family between each other, even if they're not shared bloodlines.
Right, because it's not just the blood that ties them together, but it's the bond of the people and their society and everything like that that ties them together, right? Like, if you're a Rivermain Tauren and, they have a very small-knit town from what we've seen and a close, ingrained, like, society based around their farming and everything, so maybe the entirety of them feel like their family. It comes around based on things like that.
Correct.
And with that being said, now the High Mountain Tauren have quite a few classes that they could play as in-game, but if you could take a class from World of Warcraft, the WoW RPGs, any fantasy setting, doesn't have to just be World of Warcraft, what class would you like to see the High Mountain Tauren get?
I certainly would love to see him having the Evoker class, especially dealing with the Green Flights side.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense considering how, like, nature-based the green aspect magic is and how nature-based we've seen the High Mountain Tauren been with the Rivermains. So that could definitely be a very, very good thing to see and interesting to see because we haven't seen Evoker outside of the Dracthyr, right? So other races learning how to be evokers would be pretty interesting to see. I like that choice very much. And now the High Mountain have been around since Legion, obviously. We got them as playable races, I think, in Battle for Azeroth, but since they've been introduced in the game, we've gotten a lot of lore about them. We've had many quests. Obviously, we got a new quest in Dragonflight. Which High Mountain lore character would you say is your favorite?
It's a pretty hard choice, especially between two. But I had to side with Lasan Skyhorn.
I do like Lasan and his boisterousness. He's very loud and proud. You'll know when he's around. What about Lasan makes him your favorite lore character?
Well, besides his jovial kind of nature, he's always out there trying to do more to help people and do better for the world, which is surprising.
Yeah, and he's one of the characters that we also see pop up in Dragonflight, right? He pops up in the Onaran Plains. I think you see him either close to or talking with Falstad. I could be wrong, but he's there with his eagle, and he's interacting with the centaur, which is something we don't really see the Tauren do all that much, considering how weary the regular Tauren are. But I guess High Mountains don't have that same perception of the centaur that their cousins might have.
Nope, that's especially because Centaur were not on the island when it all broke apart, so they don't have that knowledge of being near extinction because of the Centaur.
Yeah, they probably don't even know that happened, honestly, unless maybe they've been told in recent times. I don't remember exactly how the quest went, so maybe Bane, passed down that information. But yeah, they probably didn't even realize that the Centaur were natural enemies of their Tauren cousins.
Nope, and Lasan makes comment about it as he's literally hanging out in their village, chatting with them, so...
Yeah, he's having a good time exploring the world, seeing everything on his eagle, and yeah, he's chatting with the Centaur, getting all friendly. Well, Tarshal, I want to thank you for taking the time to come and do this interview. It was a very pleasant time talking with you.
Thank you for inviting me for this interview.
And
it's very fun.
Yeah, it was amazing. Thank you so much. We will see you, along with all the other race reps, at the opening ceremonies.
I'll catch you all there. Later.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Tauren Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Johan Red Totem, last son of Tahanda and of the Storm Talon tribe. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Johan, for taking the time to do this. We're going to jump right into our questions for today.
Sounds good.
So, for the first question, what made you choose Tauren as your race?
Oh, well, I'm always like the orc guy, but then at one point I was like, I kind of want my orc to have a Tauren buddy. So I was like, I decided I'm just gonna make it all character, make Johan Red Totem right here, and just went from there. And then my RP partner, she was all like, I want to make a Taunka with your character. So we made a bit of a storyline, and one thing led to another, and then I found myself meeting Noru from Storm Talon, which I believe you already interviewed.
Yeah, we've spoken to Noru.
Yes, he's a really good friend of mine. And that led to one thing to another, and I found myself into this guild I'm in now. And I learned a lot about Tauren ever since, and I would say it's my second favorite race now in World of Warcraft.
That's pretty awesome. I like how everything kind of came into play once you made your character, and the ball just immediately got rolling, and one thing led to another.
Yeah,
that's really awesome.
It's kind of crazy, to be honest, because a lot of things I wasn't planning for this character, and it actually worked out better for the character and for myself.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it.
Yeah, everything happens for a reason.
That it does. That's what they say anyways, and it tends to be true. So
yeah.
I definitely stand by
It's so
that
true.
statement. Well, what makes you so passionate about the Tauren?
I always liked Native American lore and history, and I always liked the big guys, you know. So I was just like naturally drawn to Tauren that in those two regards.
Tauren are the big
And
guys of the Horde. That is very true.
yeah, a lot of people think they're soft, you know, like I'm very friendly, but no, they're pretty brutal at times. They're just
Yeah.
as brutal as orcs can be.
I think Noru and I were having this exact same conversation actually when it came to like Taunka, because we also started talking about Tauren at one point, because like obviously they're the same species. They're
Yeah, they're
just
just
two
different.
different sub like races of that species, right? So
Yeah,
yeah, we were basically saying they seem like the gentle giants, but they can be hard warriors, as we've seen throughout the story with like Bane and Cairn and so many other members of the Tauren race and the Horde that represent the Tauren. They're fierce warriors. They're not just gentle shaman healers or anything like that. They have this whole wide variety about them.
they're very complex. They're more complex than most people give them credit for. That's for certain.
This is very true. And we see that in the lore that we get. You know, Bane's kind of had his trials and tribulations as of late, going up and down with his status within the Horde under Sylvanas and even under Garrosh. He had a lot of personal reflecting to do and thinking, and just what was he going to do for not only his people but the Horde.
Yeah.
And definitely came out stronger for it. One of my favorite leaders, Horde side, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I always liked Cairn and then Bane.
I always like Karen more.
Yeah, I remember I stopped playing for a bit before they killed him off, and then I came back and it was like, they killed off Karen. No! I had like my Darth Vader no moment.
No.
Yeah. And one part about Tauren is they could be a lot of classes in game, and they've gotten a lot of new classes, which has expanded on their characters and the lore and everything. So on that topic, if you could have any class for the Tauren, it doesn't have to just be from World of Warcraft or from the World of Warcraft RPG. It could be from any fantasy setting. What class would you like to see the Tauren get?
Well, technically paladins are sunwalkers, so maybe like a class skin for that. But if I had to guess from the RPG, probably Brewmasters.
Ooh, okay. That's a good choice. I like that.
Yeah.
What about that is the reason why you would want to see that?
Because like it's been established in the lore, and I believe it's still in the lore as well. Plus, you could like probably like have cool little customization options for that class, similar to Demon Hunters, where you have like runes inscribed on your fur, and you have like a different play style or something like that. I think that'd be kind of cool. Like maybe like runes on your arms and maybe on your horns.
Yeah.
Just more customization options to pick from, you know?
It would be interesting to see what kind of weapons and armor they would get too, like rune forged spears or rune engraved weapons, you know?
Ooh, that would be really nice. I might actually have to like class change red if they have like glowing rune spears.
Yeah, even like the giant totems they use, maybe each rune imbued on the totem adds some special effect, you know?
Honestly, I want more totem options in general, like more totem mogs, like these right here.
It's been good to see like that whole quest line we got in Dragonflight where we got the big totem. That was pretty cool. So maybe we can get more of that.
I was pretty happy to finally have that option.
I bet.
Both in the back mog and the weapon mog. Because I'm just like, it's been like nearly 20 years and now we're just getting actual totem weapons and mogs for Tauren. That's crazy.
Well, they finally are able to do a lot more now than I guess they were back then. So it's good to see that at least we're getting it, you know?
Yeah. Hopefully by Last Titan, maybe we'll have some. When we go back to Norzarind, we'll get some new Taunka weapons and style weapons and mogs. You know.
Here's hoping. It would be nice to see.
I believe in medicine. I
think we all do. We're glad to see him back.
We all are.
Now, the Tauren have been pretty present in the last couple of expansions. Obviously, the most present they were in was Battle for Azeroth when the High Mountain got introduced, but throughout that we've had Bane pretty much front and center in a lot of the story, a lot of the cinematics, the quests, that sort of thing. Out of all the Tauren lore characters, which character is your favorite?
That's a very hard question. I would say probably Hole and High Mountain.
Ooh, okay.
I mean, that's a bit of cheating because, High Mountain, but he was originally like a normal Tauren too.
He was technically the first High Mountain, but he was a Tauren, so we'll count that.
Yeah.
Okay, I
But
like
that
that pick.
Mainly because when I was developing Red's story and his relationship with his spear, I kind of looked at other lore pieces. I'm like, oh wow, he's actually very similar to Holm. I'm actually surprised by that.
Holm did
Like,
like
they
his
both-
spear.
They both have a spear that's been blessed by a wild god. They both have a bird sing. They're both mighty warriors.
True, there is a lot of similar aesthetics going on here.
Yeah, a lot of it was unintentional too. I was like, am I copying Holm? No.
Sometimes the
Am
best
I-
things are unintentional, you know?
Yeah.
When it comes to our
yeah,
character
for sure.
development. We don't mean for it to
Yeah.
happen, and then it happens, and we're like, wow, this just made my character go up so many more levels.
Yeah, I always joked that my orc is like a diet Thrall, my Maghar is a diet Garrosh. I guess Red is somewhat a diet Holm, but not really, because Red is somewhat goofy at times, but at times he's kind of serious.
Well, we gotta pull inspiration from some places, you know? So there's nothing wrong with it in my mind.
Yeah, but still, it's just that one was kind of surprising to me.
I very much enjoyed the Holm quest lines in High Mountain when you go and do the spirit walking and you play as Holm. And you're
That was
going through
cool.
the
I like
War of the Ancients
that
and
was-
everything. Yeah,
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
that was very good. Awesome. Well, Johan, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Anytime.
We appreciate it greatly, and we will see you along with all the other race reps at the opening ceremonies.
All right then. See you later.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Taunka Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Noru Ravenscar of the Stormtelling Tribe, and I am the 2024 TOA Taunka Rep.
Thank you for taking the time to do this. I'm going to move on right to the first question. What made you choose Taunka as your race?
For one, Taunka are very underrepresented in Warcraft lore and in roleplay. I barely see any of them around. There's maybe a good handful of us that I actually know of, and I like Tauren, I like giant races, and the fact that there's an even bigger, even more mysterious northern giant version of a Tauren, it was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, that is awesome. You know, it's great to see the representation of not playable races, and especially ones that we don't know a whole lot about and we don't see a whole lot about. It just brings in a whole different level of life to the universe, you know? Makes the world feel a bit more living and leads to a lot more RP experiences. Plus the Taunka are pretty cool, so can't complain about that.
Yep.
So moving on to our next question. What makes you so passionate about the Taunka?
The fact that Taunka are essentially in everything that they are more primal versions of Tauren, because Tauren are offshoots of the Yongle, and they are the common ancestor for both Taunka and Tauren, but Taunka take more of the... It's like a healthy balance between the two. I like playing a character that's more to their roots, more or less. It's the same how they were. Taunka were built to survive, and I just like that fact. I just like Northrend as a whole, and I think it's a pretty good area, and I think Taunka fit right into it, and it was sort of molded around them, and the fact that they have enough about them to make them unique to Tauren, I think it's something that should be explored a lot more compared to, let's say, other races.
Very true. You could tell just from being in Northrend that Taunka are survivors, and they're built different. they're
Oh yeah.
They're there to conquer the frozen wastes, You know, they're not taking any BS from anyone, to put it, and it's just really cool to have seen them when I got into Wrath of the Lich King for the first time. You know, I wasn't expecting an offshoot of the Tauren, and then like you said, that led to us meeting in Pandaria the Yongle, which are the ancestors of both the Tauren and the Taunka. So it's just great to see all these sub races, I guess, popping up around Azeroth. Hopefully, maybe we'll get them in the game. You know,
One can hope. One can hope.
Taunka should have been there over High Mountain. Just saying, you know.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the common consensus. You have this whole unique race. Come on, go ahead, do it. Pull the trigger.
Come on, Blizzard.
Come on, Blizz, do it. Make Taunka playable.
Well, I guess so moving on to the next question, with the classes that Tauren have now in game. Obviously, you guys have like almost all of them except for like Demon Hunter and Evoker. If you could be any other class from any other fantasy setting, doesn't have to be World of Warcraft. It could be from the WoW RPG, like whatever you think. What class do you think Taunka should get, and what would you be?
That's a kind of difficult question because I feel like Taunka would get pretty much everything that they already embody. You know, you have obviously Big Boy here is a culmination of both shaman and warrior, essentially what Thrall is. I feel like they would be good hunters. I feel like they would be good shamans on their own, pure warriors. I think they would be good druids. But if I had to pick something fantastical, I guess it would sort of be maybe Artificer, because people often don't think of Tauren as being very technologically savvy. They think of them as these primitive giants, but they're actually a lot smarter than people think. And they could probably, if they put their mind to it, make something akin to a dwarven construct or a gnome construct. I think it would be something pretty cool to explore.
That is a very great choice, and you're actually the second person to have said Artificer. Someone said Tinkerer/Artificer, and I think you're right. People underestimate the Tauren. They just see these big, hulking people that are very set in their ways and don't seem to want to technologically advance, which obviously isn't true. I mean, look at the Great Lift in Thunderbluff. Look at all the stuff that they have. They have technology. It's just not what the rest of Azeroth might come to expect, but the Tauren could easily build on that and make something insane. Like, you never know. And even like the Taunka too, right? They have all their lifts. Like, you could kind of tell across Azeroth that it's a technologically advanced species. Obviously, I mean, all of them have lifts. They have just a bunch of crazy giant structures that, you know, might not have been seen prior. Who knows? Maybe they were like the originators of all this technology, right? So I think Artificer would be an amazing class. It's definitely a good choice.
Yep, I could agree there.
So obviously Taunka, not one of the major players in a lot of things. So I guess I'll move this question on to Tauren/Taunka, depending on if you have an answer or not. But of your race's lore characters, do you have a favorite lore character?
I do, and it's actually one of the inspirations for Naru himself. It is the legendary Taunka Stormhoof, a Taunka who quite literally tamed the elements of storm, literally bent them to his beck and call, became one with the storm himself, and he is actually the focus of a quest up there in Tankalo in the Storm Peaks, which is not far from here.
Ooh.
And I think it's pretty cool. It's an idea that I think could be explored a little more about certain figures in lore actually going out and taming a certain type of power and having a legend built around them.
That sounds epic. I've done Northrend Quest, but I must have not like paid attention to that, but now I want to go through and do it again because it just sounds amazing. I think that whole concept that you were talking about is definitely something that, like you said, needs to be expanded on more, and people need to go and do things to have their legend built around it instead of just things happening and then they are the legend, you know? Like, there needs to be more of a build-up. And so you said this was in the Storm Peaks, yeah? So this is where people could find it?
Yep, up at Camp Tunkalo in the Storm Peaks, just not far from here.
Awesome. Y'all should go check that out for sure. Okay. Well, Noru, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. I definitely enjoyed it. And
Awesome.
I hope that this might inspire more people to play these giant beasts because man, I've had a blast since I've made him. It's been pretty cool, I would say. A nice experience away from your standard peace pipe smoking Tauren.
Hey, you never know. There might be a bunch of Tonkas that jump up after this, but we will see you at the opening ceremonies with all the other race reps. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Horde Pandaren race rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, my name is Eddie. Yeah, I play a character of Mingwei Lastblade, female Pandaren rep for the Tournament of Ages 2024.
Awesome. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I'm going to jump right into the first question, which is what made you choose Pandaren as your race?
So when I first got into WoW, it was super new, Dragonflight. I had a lot of lore to catch up on. Pandaren seemed to be the most easily digestible at the time, and I was right in the way of how kind of easy to learn, hard to master, like the whole understanding of their culture is. So I was really drawn into that. Playing it on the Horde side was extra interesting because I got to take this kind of typical, like essence and spirit of the Pandaren race and create something like unique and kind of a juxtaposition on top of it in a conflicting kind of interesting narrative way.
All right, yeah, that is awesome. Dragonflight is pretty interesting place to start. When you came into it, did you have any like prior knowledge? Did you like research the races and then you're like, ooh, panda?
I did a little research. Like I said, it was a lot of wiki scrolling before I decided to make the leap.
Right.
You know what I mean? This was a short while ago. But out of all of them, I knew I wanted to play on the Horde because that's where all my friends were. But the Pandaren, the Horde Pandaren definitely stuck out to me as the one with the most potential for the type of stories that I was wanting to write. And I think I hit the nail on the head with it because I've been having a blast with this character ever since.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always good to be where friends are. So you kind of expanded on a couple of things here. So we'll jump into the next question because it seems like it's leading into that anyway. So perfect segue. What makes you so passionate about playing a Pandaren but also a Horde Pandaren?
So the nature of like the Pandaren itself, kind of a little bit like the Vulpera, but I didn't really know about the Vulpera at the time. It's super open ended, right? So like being a Pandaren necessarily means that you can kind of do whatever you want in essence, right? There's not a whole lot of things that tie Pandaren down to, say, something like Pandaria, for example. Because you have the Wandering Isles Pandaren, you have the Mainlanders, and then you have the two primary like schools of thought outside of that. In Azeroth proper, Kalador, Eastern Kingdom, stuff like that. But you also have little sub factions like the Lore Walkers, who are just kind of like, from what I understand, a little bit all over the place, just collecting history and stuff like that. The amount of professions, the amount of kind of subgroups, like Pandaria being a closed off kind of existence, as well as kind of the Wandering Isles for a while. It really kind of ironically opened the door for when they finally did set foot on the mainland. So the biggest pull for me is just like how limitless the potential for storytelling is with Pandarens and roleplay and stuff like that. From a gameplay perspective, they're just very cute. So that's good for me. Good enough for me.
The aesthetic cuteness is always a bonus for sure.
Absolutely.
I think you sort of hit the nail on the head there because a lot of people who see Pandaren maybe only look at the two perspectives of there's the Hojin Pandaren for the Horde and then the Tushui for the Alliance, right? But
Yes.
there's so much more to that race that like people don't really tend to expand upon a lot. Like you're saying, there's the Lore Walkers, but then you have the Order of the Cloud Serpent. You got all these different reputation factions that obviously we get to do quests for and stuff in game, but each of those factions has such a unique and differentiating story. Like the Lore Walkers literally just care about their history and telling that history of Pandaria. but then you have obviously the Order of the Cloud Serpent, who is traditionally just raising up all the Cloud Serpents in Pandaria. And then you kind of go to the Timeless Isle, where you still have Xiao Hao chilling there, you know? So it's such a wide scope, and I feel like people need to definitely branch out more, and it's cool to see someone like you doing that.
It's so watching the living, breathing, because Pandaria itself, like the land of Pandaria, is almost like a character unto itself. You know what I'm saying? Because it is like a living, breathing kind of place, you know, in essence. And so to see kind of like what was once a closed off society taking care of this land, you know, with such passion, as if it's like, you know, a family member of sorts, you know, like everybody's pitching in, everybody's doing like the Order of the Cloud Serpents. It seems super small, but the Cloud Serpents are super important, you know, like all of these little, you know, like the Golden Lotus and the Shadow Pan and stuff like that. Like it's all just, even outside of the reps, walking around, seeing how people live, the tillers, for example, or the anglers, you know, like it's all very strung together, you know, and it's all very communal, right? But outside of the mainland, you can kind of bring that energy outward, right? If you are going to play more of a traditional Pandaren, which I kind of don't, but if you are going to go that route, the potential is there pretty much anywhere, you know, because of the kind of not lax nature. They do have a lax nature, but it's more about the emotional control that they have to exercise and the discipline in, you know, like generations of living alongside the Shah and what have you.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a fun experience, like seeing how many roles Pandaren can fill on a baseline level, and then realizing that that's not all, right? That the only reason that those roles are a finite list on Pandaria is because of the mists, and which are now down. And you know these guys like to wander around. You know these guys love exploring. So
Yeah, every little part is like a cog in the machine. They all play their part, and down to from the highest position down to like the lowest, right? It's
Right.
just insane. And yeah, with the mists opening, there's even more stuff that could happen. So moving on from that to our next question. So Pandarans have a wide variety of classes, like most races do now in the game. They also don't have some classes. So out of the classes they don't have, maybe from World of Warcraft or other, you know, fantasy-based RPGs, stuff like that, what class would you like to see brought to Pandaren, and what would you be?
I am smiling a little bit because this question, you know, the answer is so easy. It's Paladin, right? I want Pandaren Paladins to be a thing, and I want to, for the roleplay potential, maybe even the justification, right? That they are Paladins that draw power from like their belief in the Celestials and stuff like that. It is a class that I wanted to play when I was first getting into WoW, right? And I kind of like leaned back on Warrior a little bit, and I'm glad that I did. But I really, really, really hope that Pandaren Paladins become a thing in the future. And I can almost bet money that my Alliance counterpart on the other side is going to say something to that effect as well. But definitely Paladins.
Paladins do have like a wide variety of things too, right? They fill all roles, so that'd be cool. You could get a tank, healer, DPS coming back in, but also like that just opens up my mind to what celestial would they be? Because obviously for like Zandalari, they don't channel from the light; they channel from one of their Loas, and like the Tauren, they worship the sun, right? And then there's the Blood Knights for paladins and all that stuff. So it's like, what celestial would the Pandarans maybe choose as either just a figurehead? Maybe they'll use the light, because obviously we have priests for Pandarans. I don't really know much about the light wielding Pandaren, unfortunately, but it's making my mind race. I'm like excited to see what would get picked and what they would use, you know.
It would, so the same way that the Pandaren temples kind of have monks that are training there, which monks also kind of fill all the roles, right?
Yeah.
They in Pandaria draw from disciplines being taught down by the Celestials and stuff like that, focusing on chi, which is like kind of a magical energy everybody has. But you know, to go so far with it as to like enter kind of like a paladin type of thing, you know, like obviously like in the Jade Forest, if you're growing up with like Yulon and stuff like that, like that's the one of the bigger like Celestials that gets kind of thrown in the lore space every once in a while is, you know, the Jade Serpent. But I think it would widely depend on, you know, it would depend on the, I don't know, maybe the spec or however people decide to define it, like where they grew up, you know, or maybe they're where their heart lies, because that's a big thing. The heart, emotions, feelings, control, discipline, stuff like that. Like I said, the Shah created this kind of culture of control. I mean, self-control, self-discipline, and like understanding. Where it's like people are going to carry that forth into their chosen discipline as well. So that's kind of what angle I would guess that would take on for Paladin.
Yeah, it might be like a mixed batch. You never know. It might not be just one celestial. It might be all of them. Like you said, it all depends. That's actually really, really neat. Okay. Yeah, I like that. It's making me think a lot right now.
Right? It's the cool thing about Pandaren is that like you'll get a cool idea, and it's 9 times out of 10 super feasible because of, like I said, how open-ended they are.
Yeah, exactly. There's like no end to what you could do, basically. Now, with that being said, we talked about obviously all the various factions within the Pandaren. We talked about their roles on like the Wandering Isle, the mainland, and throughout like Azeroth. They're still one of the relatively new races, but they have gotten their time in the sun. What is your favorite Pandaren lore character?
So I used to say my boy G Firepaw, right, and Isa Cloudsinger. Honestly, I don't have a lot of choices, even still. You know what I mean? Like Chen Stormstout, G Firepaw, Isa Cloudsinger, Mudmug. You know what I mean? Like you don't got a lot of big Pandaren, to rally behind, which is a very unfortunate thing. But G Firepaw, Isa Cloudsinger, those two, like their duality and the kind of like how they're ideologically kind of opposed to one another, but they still get along, which is very interesting to me, and it kind of represents like the harmony, of the two sides and of kind of the Pandaren as a whole. I really like those guys. If I had to pick one of the two nowadays, I think I'd pick G because he's hilarious.
He's pretty great, yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, I don't really have a lot to choose from. Pandaren rep is very, very small in the lore.
Yeah, there's not a lot of big characters, but like just doing all the dailies and stuff like that, going through all the quests. You do have like the smaller characters, like Mudmug would probably be mine, just because his quests are hilarious.
You got Gina, you got oh God, who else? Who's that guy? Taranzu,
yeah,
right? Is that his name? Taranzu? He's cool for the Shadow Pan. No, dude, there's definitely a lot of Pandaren, people that you interact with going about your day.
But not many you see front and center,
Yeah, not a whole lot of people like on the box, like or on the loading. Like even the loading screen for Pandaria is like a Mogu guy. I don't even know who that guy is. That Mogu.
Sure, it looks like a statue, right? It doesn't even look like an actual.
Right? Like, who is this guy?
Like, why isn't Chen from the box art on our loading screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, I mean, you see Chen, you see Chen around, you see, your faction person, but other than that, like right now, current like Dragonflight era, like the amount of exposure you get to Pandaren are usually the visages of Dracthyr and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's true. I think G's a very great choice though. His story with Asa, like in the Wandering Isle, and then obviously like their little moment in Siege of Orgrimmar, that's all just great. I like those two.
Yeah, that was a good moment. I like that. It's the harmony of how you can be ideologically opposed to somebody, but you can still work together. Maybe you're supposed to sit next to somebody who disagrees with you, so that you can have the total picture of what's going on.
Exactly. You need to see like the broader picture and not just your blinders on looking at a certain thing.
Yes, of course.
Awesome. Yeah. No, G's a great pick for sure. Hopefully, in the next couple of expansions, we see more of Pandarens. You never know what's going to happen.
I hope we get paladins. That's all I can really say.
That'd be great. I mean, Blizzard's working on getting every race, every class, hopefully. So, it might be a future thing. Maybe in Midnight or something.
Maybe. I hope so. Well, if you see me changing classes, you see me walking around in gold and white, you know what happened.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. It's been amazing.
Absolutely.
And we will see you at the opening ceremonies with the other race reps.
All right. I would love to see you guys there.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Horde Dracthyr race rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. You may know me as Fabrynth. I've worked the World's Fair Carnival security this year. I also am one of the many members of the Argent Advance and the Allied Associate of the Argent Onslaught. It is a pleasure to meet all of you.
Thank you so much, Fabric, for taking the time to do this. I'm going to jump into our first question, which is what made you choose Dracthyr as your race?
Well, following the end of some people might call it a Nightmare of Shadowlands, I had been feeling especially torn about what I was going to do following into Dragonflight. So when the Dracthyr showed up, a very open type of race that had hopefully to be added more customization, but felt very freeing compared to all the story beats that I had begun to feel disconnected from with my old characters. Dracthyr was just kind of a good choice to try and start out the new X pack with a fresh breath of air, and I've been stuck with them ever since. I can't get rid of them. I love these lizards.
Yeah, honestly, that is very relatable and understandable because I feel like Redacted expansion kind of did that to a lot of people and sucked the fun out of the characters that they had. So they had to find new ways of doing things, and that's either by reinventing that same character or maybe making a new one. And the Dracthyr were perfect for that because they were a clean slate in essence, right? So you could just do what you wanted while being a dragon and being able to fly. Now to
It's been a blast, honestly.
Yeah, I bet. I've been meaning to make a Dracthyr, but I've just been so busy. But to expand on why you chose a Dracthyr, could you tell us what makes you so passionate about the Dracthyr?
Well, I've always loved Warcraft's dragons. I may not always agree with the writers on what they do to these guys, but I absolutely adore them. I've always been into dragons, so when the opportunity for the Dracthyr came up, especially a type of race that was so connected to the dragons, it was a very exciting new prospect to join about them. And even though Blizzard, in my own opinion, has really fallen and dropped a lot of the balls with the Dracthyr and kind of abandoned their lore after a certain point, it feels like, they've also been taking a lot more risks with the Dracthyr story and a lot more openness and connectiveness, such as Emberthal's questline that came out before pre-patch. I don't remember. There's been a lot of patches. But the one with about visages and stuff, that one, as someone who is a part of the LGBT community as trans, felt very, very wholesome, and it felt very good to see that in the race that I play.
Yeah, on a level, you were able to very much connect with that quest line, right? It was a very interesting quest line. I liked doing it. I made sure to do it, and just hearing everyone's stories of why they picked their visages or like why they chose to be the way that they are, and then presenting all that to Emberthal just felt very exciting and freeing and just good to see in a game, especially in this time of age with a lot of issues going on, you know?
Oh, it was especially delightful, because especially for the people who might not have a lot of friends who are in the community or are trans themselves and are struggling to process and understand how they feel, all those different perspectives of why people choose the way they choose and how they look and all that, I felt like it could hopefully give a lot of people who are trying to learn about that insight, and for that to be connected to literally the race I main is just amazing, honestly.
It was very much an education that I think a lot of people needed, and it just added more layers onto your race, right? So it just made you feel even more connected to it and enjoy it. I know it made me want to actually dive into Dracthyr more and sit down and figure out, okay, so what makes my Dracthyr, right? So like I did that quest, and then immediately my brain was just like, wow, there is layers to this that I didn't even think of.
Oh yeah, no. I always encourage people, especially if that quest line influenced and encouraged their brains to want to make your Dracthyr. They are some of the most open races right now. They don't got years of horrible lore to fight against like many other races. You can be whatever with them. The only thing you can't be is not an elf visage.
The Dracthyr don't have years of lore that got retconned, then brought back, then retconned, and brought back. So it's definitely liberating on, I think, many perspectives.
Just give us a few years. We might not be safe.
Yeah, we'll have to knock on wood for sure. We don't want to jinx anything with this interview. But with that being said, the Dracthyr obviously at the moment have one class, the Evoker. You have like different specializations for it, obviously. But with that being said, what class from World of Warcraft, the WoW RPGs, or any sort of fantasy setting would you like to see the Dracthyr get?
Well, I'll always promote my OG class, Druid. I'm a Druid main. I'm one of those horrible feral Druid mains, though I've gone balanced more recently until Blizzard butchered it. Um, but if I were to have them get any class besides Druid, honestly, and they probably are gonna get it because it's the one of the classes that every race gets is Mage. Mage is always fun.
And with Mage, they could use a lot of that blue aspect magic that they have, right? So, and same with Druid, they could tap into the green flight magic. But I think Mage and Druid would be a great choice. And actually, I think your Alliance counterpart said the exact same choices for the class was both Mage and Druid. So that's,
I have good taste.
It's pretty funny to see both of you end up coming to the same conclusion. I actually like that quite a bit. And one of the things that I talked about with the Alliance Dracthyr rep was the different forms that they would like to see for the Dracthyr Druid. Is there any that you would specifically like to see that maybe you've already thought about? Or do you think that they would just go the more straight up like dragon route and just only have like dragon forms? Like the flying's just going to be their dragon form and then...
A Dracthyr Druid is what makes it really fun, because I think you could do both options, especially depending on, like, how that said character would hang around. Like, you could have the more draconic options, but if they let you, like, kind of switch like you do in the barbershop currently, a Dracthyr could totally just have the same forms as all the other druids. They have been reintroduced into the world, so I mean, there's a lot of influence in a lot of things I've seen.
That is also very true. Because the Dracthyrs do take a visage, they could potentially just tap into whatever druid forms they feel best suits themselves, right? But then you'll obviously have other druid players being like, well, why can't we do that? So it's that slippery slope of balance that they'll have to find.
Because y'all didn't use Lizard.
Yeah. And for Mage, it would be interesting if, being that they are Dracthyr, if you would see like a Mage tank spec come in, right? And maybe it would be specific to the Dracthyr, and maybe it wouldn't. You could have like a Battle Mage-esque spec with them.
You are speaking my language, especially since there is a running joke with the actual character Fabrant. One of his many titles is Mage Tank, because of how I've roleplayed him in combat. So if they ever got a tank spec that was based off the Mage, oh, I would be living a dream.
Yes, I think a lot of people would. I know several Mage players who have been waiting for it for a long time, but it's interesting to hear that like your character is known as the Mage Tank, because in battle, I assume you're up on the front lines like you were saying, and not just hanging back throwing spells at people. You're more front and center, using your magic to dish out some damage.
Pretty much, especially since, like, his story, he is a scale commander, and so he has the giant height. So what's more scarier? 10-foot Dracthyr in the back just throwing spells, or a 10-foot Dracthyr boosting his own spells and body tackling you to the ground?
Yeah, definitely the latter. I think if I saw a 10-foot dragon getting very, very angry with me in the front lines, I would probably be very scared. You definitely would not see me just charging at it, that's for sure. To speak more on the Dracthyr, they're obviously our newest race that we have had since Dragonflight. We'll be getting one more in the War Within. But for Dracthyr, which Dracthyr lore character would you say is your favorite lore character?
My mind immediately goes to Emberthal, because even though I feel like Blizzard dropped the ball on a lot of her story, I have thoroughly enjoyed seeing her process and learn about the actual history of the Dracthyr, and not what they might have been prone to remembering based on their deep slumber. And having her walk alongside a lot of the characters that we know and have gotten used to, such as Ebonhorn, Rathian, Sibelian. It's been a very interesting thing to watch the back and forth between her and the other Obsidians, especially since she is so connected to the Obsidian story.
Emberthal was actually my pick when I asked this to your Alliance counterpart, and then they also ended up choosing Emberthal, so we're all three of the same brain cell, it would seem.
Hey, she's not a bad choice. She's a wonderful choice.
She's not a bad choice, and I think that storyline that we talked about with her visage form is something that actually made me want to pick her when I was thinking about it too, because you do get to discover more about her, and there aren't that many Dracthyr that are sort of front and center in the story that you get to learn about, so Emberthal is kind of the one that we do spend the most time with. And I think because of that, a lot of players have probably built like a connection with the character and sort of like a bond and a sense of familiarity. So top tier choice in my mind.
I'd have to say too, like, if I didn't pick Emberthal, like, she's the one entirely for like story and growing alongside her, but if I had to pick any other NPC Dracthyr, Cinderthresh is my second option. The Dracthyr leader of the Horde. There is a little bit of a softer choice, solely because I love the fact, and I don't know if a lot of people have picked up on this, Cinderthresh has different pronouns depending on what form they're in, and their visage form versus their Dracthyr form also have two different voices.
Ooh, I did not pick up on that actually, so that's really interesting to know.
If you go back through the Visage storyline and you have sound on, if you can find a clip of when Cinderthresh is in the Dracthyr form and then listen to that, her in the actual storyline for the Visage, two different voices.
I'm gonna have to go back and do that. I know I haven't done it on all my characters yet, so probably immediately after this interview I'm gonna run back to Valdrakken and do that.
When I noticed it, it got me so excited. It was amazing to witness.
As it should. Those little details are amazing, and the community likes to see stuff like that, makes us feel more connected to the characters.
It really made me love Cinderthresh all the more and love being a Horde Dracthyr because it's you're mine, you ain't getting away now.
You're here to stay, that's for sure. Well, Fabrinth, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I greatly appreciate it.
Of course, I was delighted to be here.
And we will see you, along with all the other race reps, at the opening ceremonies.
Can't wait to see everyone there this week.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the 2024 Tournament of Ages race rep interviews. The Tournament of Ages is a week-long charity-based event at the Argent Tournament Grounds in Northrend from August 4th through 10th. Events start at 7 p.m. CST and go until 12 a.m. CST. The Tournament of Ages aims to help provide charity money to the Blessings in a Backpack organization, which in turn helps provide school-age children with meals on the weekends. Thank you so much, everyone. You could donate via the QR code on the screen or the link below, and we will catch you at the Tournament of Ages.